Peace, 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 family. Peace, peace, peace. My computer is acting an ass. My headset needs to be replaced, and I can't find my microphone. Okay, but so we're on the phone, but you will be seeing things from the computer if the computer and StreamYard and whoever the hell else um, allows me to. I want to play some videos today. We're going to do some reading today. I apologize for not being here on yesterday. Me and my friend hung out for a minute. I got ready to do something, got a phone call that lasted until 11 o'clock last night. So I was not able to come back on and continue to read from this book, which is what I want to do today. On this day, and hey, Milestones, I see you in the chat and the others who had came in as well. Welcome to you. Welcome and happy Saturday, Sunday. Okay. Um, as I was starting out this morning, well, never mind. In the description, I just happened to put a little description in there so that not only can you guys know what this is about and choose whether or not you're interested, but I can actually go back and look at it myself and remember what the damn stream was about. Okay, that's my laziness and my fault over the years for trying to be a little creative and yeah, that part. Anyway, so what this is about is a treatise of enlightenment, or the treatise of the three impostors and the problem with the age of enlightenment. The videos that I want to add to this has to do with what's going on right now in the academic and political arena. Hi, Josephine Short. Um, what's going on? I just happened to stumble across it today, and I was like, it caught my interest, and I said, it kind of deals with what we're talking about, the problem with the age of enlightenment, even though that comes from the 1700s, and we're here in 2025. But it also deals with the Trump administration or the political arena, I'll just say it that way, in as much as we talked about before the 1615 project and the 1776 project. Okay. And if any of you guys have not heard about that and you want me to briefly go over what it is, will. I can do that. Put a one in the chat for me and let me know. Um, and it also uh, it deals with the whole education thing that has been going on with the Trump administration since he's gotten in, talking about giving the education system back to the states or whatever. I don't know how that's gonna go. Okay, all right, milestones. Hey, Truth Zone. Okay, so the 1619 project and the 1776 project are two projects that were going on in the last. Well, Biden was in office for 4 years, and Trump was in there before that. So when Trump was in office, his administration had presented what you call the 1776 project. The 1776 project was about people who had PhDs and were versed in particular studies, trying to correct the education and miseducation of America, if you would, people in America. Well, what happened was as soon as Biden came into office, he tabled that executive order. Now, the executive orders, the numbers are so close, they're actually inverted. And I'm going to get these numbers wrong because I would have to go look at it. But let's say Trump did executive order 11958. When Biden came in, he did executive order 1150, 11 5 8, let's say 598. They use the same numbers, okay? Um, and we wouldn't be the wiser because if we're looking for executive Trump's order, which let's say is 11958, Google will shoot us to Biden's, which has the same numbers, and we may not recognize what was going on. That's one part. Some little shady shit that was going on. On top of this, okay, this order got tabled, and the reason why it got tabled is because journalists and the New York Times in particular, which were two that were mentioned, I'm not adding this, but two that were mentioned. ¿Cómo está? Um, anyway, don't ask me to say nothing else, man. But anyway, the journalist and New York, they were critiquing the 1776 project. Okay, I'm gonna have problems with this damn computer. I see it now. Yep, it's jumping in and out, so we may not even be able to use the computer today. But I'm on my phone, so we still may be able to do it. We'll see. So anyway, um, so it was journalists and the New York Times that were critiquing this pursuit of correcting the education of Americans, if you would, you know. And we fight over this shit, whether a democracy, a democratic republic, or a republic, or none of the above, or whatever the hell. So the public has been miseducated in a lot of ways about the nature of this country for propaganda. And the problem is that the 1619 Project supports. We all came over here on slave ships in 1619. Okay, and which y'all see it here online when people are talking about Pan-Africans and Africans and Black and African and African American and slave ships and all that shit, versus what we have said are American Indians, Aborigines, stuff like that. um, so when the Biden administration tabled the Trump administration's executive order, um, it also they critiqued it. Okay, the people who critiqued it were not historians, they were not lawyers, they were not scientists, they were not people who had PhDs in the things that were being discussed. It was people who were in journalism who were critiquing what was going on, which didn't give us an accurate accounting. It gave us opinion, because as we know, sometimes this society that we live in need to keep us in a particular mindset so that they can continue to use us rather than eruditing it. They want to train us like animals rather than eruditing, to use Taj's words. So these are two programs that came out, and we read that book about a month ago. The book that I had found at the library. And if you go back in my stream, you should see the 1776 Project. That is me reading that whole book so that we are aware of what the 1776 Project is, how it got tabled, what happened. All your details are there. And that's for the person who put the one in the chat. Okay. So in light of this, we're talking about the education system. Okay. Now, what's outside of my wheelhouse is the fact that I'm never going to Harvard, Cambridge, or any of the other of those. And I'm assuming that the people who listen to me aren't either. Okay. But this is something that is happening in our society, in our community, and it is still being governed or led by people's opinions. And people put a lot of stuff out there, like just me reading the looking at the videos that I was looking at. Um, I could see some discrepancies that when the public is not researching and they're only hearing little sound bites of certain things, they can also be misguided. For example, they're talking about. Uh, I think one group was saying it was 25% of Harvard's enrollment that are foreign students. Another one said it was 33, or about a third percent that are affected. They talked about monies that they assume that Trump is trying to get away from Harvard because they get billions of dollars. But someone else made mention that the billions of dollars and the money that they, how can I say this, that the tuition that these students are paying, full tuitions that they're paying to come over here, goes toward payroll and student services and excuse me, different other things in the functioning of that institution, whereas the endowment is billions of dollars, but it is not being affected in as much as the not having these billions are going to take away from those billions of dollars. It's just two different avenues, and because of the information, how it's coming out, we may think that when Trump talks about the billions, that he's talking about billions collectively, but there's a nuance in it. That's what I'm trying to say. Excuse me, my sinuses are stuffed up right now. But So it's a billion over here for the tuition, because they're paying for the student services with their full tuition, and then there's the billions with the endowment. My computer is giving me such a fucking problem. There's probably too many people on the internet around here. So let's see if we can correct the computer. I'm gonna look at you guys on the phone for a minute and try to get this computer back up, and hopefully everything will be as it needs to be, because it's easier for me to look at y'all on the phone, on the computer, than on the phone. So let me try to restart the computer and just talk to y'all in the interim. Okay. So a couple things are going on. Other things are going on. I just want to bring this current event up right now. Not that it affects any of us to a great extent, other than how we feel about one administration, the other administration, education, whatever, whatever. But just to be aware of some stuff that ain't gonna cause people to lose their shit. you know, when you talk about it. The other thing that is going on as far as the foreign exchange students, like when I looked at one video, it was talking about, it was kind of talking about everybody, but you could tell it had the uh, Israeli Palestine Jew narrative, or Jewish narrative, in the forefront. That these people, hold this stuff about anti-Semitism. Well, when you looked at another one, it was about the Chinese or the Asians, because they had Chinese people up there, and then they also had Taiwanian people up there talking about students, talking about what they were going through. And so all of this has to do with the politics that has been going on in a few years with C-19, because y'all know how we felt about what was going on, what was pushed out here um, through social media and news outlets and stuff like that about who did what as far as C-19 was concerned. They talk about terrorism, but and terrorism and money, but I don't know if you guys are like me. When they talk about terrorism and money, it has a leaning toward the Muslim countries, if you would. And, you know, it's just a lot of shit that's being put out here. But even like with talking about the schools and foreign exchange students, it also resonated for the fact that we know that in trucking, there's been the reports. I shared some of the one stories that were given to me um, about people who were in trucking, being that they didn't speak English, and Trump had did this initiative, and that might not be the legal term for it, but this initiative where if you didn't speak English in trucking and you couldn't read English in trucking, they were kicking foreigners out the trucking industry. So now we're moving over to the educational center, or institutions and stuff like that. And I don't know, this might be a conversation that, you guys might want to have in the future, as you move forward, or at least be aware of as they start to play narratives and stuff. So I'm gonna have to, on that tip, I'm gonna have to play about 4 videos for y'all to see how these stories are coming out about what's going on. Okay, and then you can make your decisions as you choose to, if you choose to. For us on this side of the aisle, meaning those of us who are not in Harvard, or those of us who have children or grandchildren that one day may decide to go to college, may decide to go to a university, my thought is that if this vacuum is created in these higher institutions of learning, because 25 to 33% of foreigners are not being allowed to go here, to go to U.S. universities, if you would, then how do we prepare our children to meet those entrances, to take up that slack? Because they're saying that, one, the foreign exchange students, the research, the labs, and all of that stuff, the medical field, all of that affects the world. It's not just, a specific group of people that these students are going to school to learn things, to be able to address. They want to address things in their communities. Okay, there's countries and like, um, damn. And they talked about like technology, different kinds of technology, or briefly mentioned it. I might have thought about technology in as much as, and let me put this to the table. in as much as we started out and we had Facebook, right? Facebook came out, I think it was Yale's interest system of students communicating with each other, and then boom, it's out here and everybody's using Facebook, and the things they say about, law enforcement and government agencies utilizing Facebook for their own purposes, that we're sharing all of our information, but it started with students. And in as much as there would be a vacuum in technology if foreign students were barred from going to Harvard or something like that, then how do we take up that slack? What is it that we need to do with our children in our communities to prepare our people to fill those seats, if that's what we choose to do, to affect technology? Okay. So those are some of the thoughts that I had about it. Let me just get this computer back up, see if it'll come back in. I was listening to one of these videos and walked in the kitchen, and I stopped hearing shit. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I came back and my headset had popped off, but it's at 70%. And I'm like, why is my headset popping off? And so put it back on again. It says it's connected. Came on the StreamYard, and it said that I had no microphone connected, even though it's connected to my computer. So we had to I tried it a couple times, and I just said forget it. I backed out and went on my phone. Um, like I said, I don't know if this is StreamYard, Google, my internet service, okay, or or a defective headset. I don't know. I don't know what it is. The traffic on the internet today, because a lot of people are at home. So let's see if we can get this StreamYard back up here on the computer, because I want to share those videos with you until I can, at least until I can get my throat and my sinuses open, because y'all don't need to hear me sniffing. So we're gonna have to go do something in the interim of this. All right, computer's coming in, and of course now it's gonna say I don't have a mic connected, but let's see what happens. It was nice to have my friend here. He has a few more years in trucking than I do, and so to bring him in, camera. That's why it's coming in black. There it is. Okay. It was a pleasure to have him here. Not seeing him for like 9 years. We are getting old. You can see the oldness in our in our bodies. It's like, damn, dude. We knew each other back in our 20s. I've been knowing him for a long time. But he was able to sit down and tell me some things to look out for, because he's been an owner operator, even though it was like hot shot. But he's been in the industry for a long time. He used to do car hauling and stuff like that, which is too much work for me. And so we sat down, we looked at the load board. I was telling him about it. He told me how he does his loads, or how he deals direct with the loads and stuff like that. But having the load board, doing a dedicated run for, working with a particular broker and running their loads, this, that, and the other, can sometimes get you other business where you can work directly with that particular broker or that particular shipper, because they can't get that load, and you gonna be there. They know you're gonna be there on this load. Um, so and then he gave me the 3Ds. He was like, downtime, detention, and disposal. Just make sure that when I'm talking to these people about these loads, what if I get there and they don't receive the load, and I got to stay there overnight until they open up? Do they pay downtime? Which he said downtime because there's a couple downtimes that he used. And I was like, okay. And detention. So I was like, the 3Ds. And then disposal. If they reject the load, that's money, because you got to go travel to take that somewhere. That's time that you're not making money. So make sure that you um, make sure that they pay you for having to dispose of a rejected load. So this is a whole new ball game for me, but It's gonna be beautiful. It's gonna be beautiful nonetheless. If not beautiful, um, enlightening. Okay, so let me see if I can find these videos that I was looking at, even though I had to close all these tabs out, you know, fucker. And see if we can pull some of these videos in, let you guys take a look at this, and then we'll get to that read. All right, back in here. You know, yeah, okay, I'll wait. We'll do that later. All right, so this is all done under fair use, and I will put that banner up in a moment. This is the first one. Judge blocked Trump's administration. This is from NBC News, and it doesn't take that long, but just check out the information, okay? Check out how the information is presented to you and make your decision according to knowledge. Like I said, don't make my choice for me, okay? Tell me, you know, give me the whole lay of the land and I'll decide for myself, and that's what we need to do. All right, check this out.
From the administration. In turn, Harvard's a federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from taking action against Harvard. Yesterday, Trump barred the university from enrolling international students since the school refused to adhere to certain demands from the administration. In turn, Harvard sued the Trump administration. And this morning, the university president writing a letter condemning their actions, saying in part, quote, "It imperils the future of thousands of students and scholars across Harvard and serves as a warning to countless others who have come to America to pursue their education and fulfill their dreams." NBC's Antonia Hilton joins us now from Cambridge, Massachusetts. Antonia, what happens now that a court has intervened on behalf of Harvard? Can international students remain enrolled?
Yes, Ellison, the short answer is they can remain enrolled, but the more complicated answer is that even with this temporary reprieve, there's going to be a hearing next week on May 27th where we'll know more about what's actually going to happen here. The reality is these students have some very difficult decisions ahead of them. You know, say you are international right now, but you've left campus because classes ended the other day, but you were planning to come back to the U.S. this summer for, say, an internship or to do some research here on campus. Well, if things change again, you may find yourself arriving at the U.S. border and get detained. That's a real possibility that I've been talking to students about right now. They also are aware that these lawsuits, they wind on for quite a while. So does that mean they'll be in legal limbo and waiting to see, constantly feeling at risk while they're trying to learn and trying to be part of campus life? I asked one international student, a sophomore here at the undergraduate program here at Harvard, about the prospect of all of this, of potentially losing his ability to be here. Take a listen, Ellison.
I would be devastated, and a part of me is always gonna belong to Harvard, and I love learning, so I would probably do it, and I would hopefully find a university in the EU. But in this matter, I'm less concerned about myself, but more about my international friends who are from countries like Pakistan, Ukraine, Afghanistan, where it might not be safe right now to go back.
You heard from him right there mentioning that he has classmates from countries where it simply may not be safe for them to return if they were forced by this administration to have to leave campus and go back home. That's a real conversation that's happening right now on campus and from the students I've been talking to in WhatsApp groups as they rush to support each other right now, Ellison.
Antonia, you've covered this story so extensively. Can you give us a refresher on sort of how we got here? Why are Harvard and the Trump administration so at odds?
Oh boy, I will try to condense this story for you because it has been brewing for many months, as you know, Ellison. But this began with the administration sending this demand letter, wanting to know everything from kind of being able to see the views and opinions of activists and professors on campus to being able to have potential influence over things like certain academic programs and hiring and firing decisions on campus. But the latest list of demands that they received from Secretary Kristi Noem, this week was a request for all kinds of disciplinary data about students, private information that universities, by the way, don't typically have to hand over, which is why you're seeing this university not already engage with them on the lawsuit that we've already seen over the billions of dollars of aid that they've lost, but now fight again on another legal front to try to preserve really the spirit of the school and the services they provide to people from all over the world, Ellison.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.
All right, all of that was done under fair use, but we got to get a rounded view of these things, okay? So that was the first one that I watched. That was interesting, okay? Give me a second. Let me go find the second video. Okay. You see where the agenda was? In that one right there, when I was listening to it, I said, you know, I would feel some kind of way about people who had to go back to their countries and, you know, it wasn't safe for them to go back. That was one of the biggest parts on that video that I watched, okay? It might not be about what people will push as far as, oh, they're taking our resources. Oh, they're stealing our education. You know, whatever it is, it's just the human factor of it that, like the dude said, even though he was a foreign exchange student or a foreign student, he's looking at other groups who are foreigners from different areas who may be forced to go back. Okay, this is something that's going to affect people up until the school year when school starts. On one, they talked about internship in the summer, and that's an immediate effect. But they're suspecting that the enrollment is not going to be that great in the summer. And also, no, this is about the court case. And that's why it's like I hadn't heard about this. I think I ran across something, but I didn't see it until last night. And then when I woke up this morning, I was like, oh, yeah, I saw this. Let me go look at that, you know, see what that's about with this thing with Harvard. You know, not that I really care, but it was interesting, you know, because, you know, I like education. You know, like the dude said, he likes to learn. I like to learn. I think that when you stop learning, you start dying. Okay. But let's find the second one. Okay. Let's find the other video. I'm trying to get my sinuses and my throat and stuff cleaned out. I'm out of something, and it's my allergies is kicking in real bad too. All right, so let's find the second video. That would be this one here. Oh, I want to do that one. Okay, so damn, I want to do that one or that one. Let's do okay, this one right here is Trump's Harvard row risks backfiring on U.S. economy. This gentleman, he's actually saying a lot about it. He'll be referenced in another video. I don't know how they're going to feel about me playing their stuff, but it's from Times Radio on YouTube. This is kind of more so on the Asian influence, and the part it may be draining for some of you guys to listen to him speak. I'm gonna put the closed captions up there because I had to at some point. He speaks very well, but kind of slow, meticulous. So it was easier for me to back up what he was saying by reading it on the screen. So I'm gonna put the closed caption up there. But the key point of what I want you to see on this one is the older dude, not the Asian dude, but the older dude that looks like he might be working under the Trump administration. I don't know, public relations or whatever, because he goes into some of the detail about the situation and what Trump is looking for. And I want you to compare what he says. Not that I know who he is as far as an authority or not, but compare what he says to other news reports that are going out, because he gives great detail in his synopsis of the situation. All right, so let me get this one up here. Oh shit, stop that. All right, let's see if we can get this one to play. Go back to the beginning. Okay, let's hold here. Throw the closed caption on. All right, extend that. Nope, can't extend that just yet. let's present this. All right, all right. Here you go.
Harvard, they will go to one of Harvard's rivals, which can be, and more likely than not, located in the United States itself.
So I don't believe it's illegal. Again, foreign student visas are a privilege, not an entitlement. In particular, students cannot enter the United States if they provide support for designated terrorist organizations. They wouldn't be allowed to enter the United States. The Trump administration wants to remove students who've provided support to designated terrorist organizations like Hamas, and they want to be able to know which students have done that. So they want access to disciplinary records and to videos of protests. I think the Trump administration is trying to remind elite institutions in the United States that they are the beneficiaries of very large subsidies from taxpayers. And so they do have to serve American interests. They are not global institutions, or if they wish to be global institutions, then they have to give up access to very large taxpayer subsidies. Open discussion is a very important part of a quality education, and we do want a free exchange of ideas. But we want a proper intellectual mix. We want people with a variety of viewpoints in these institutions so that the education can be rigorous and diverse. And the problem is that when you bring in, half of your students from overseas, then you begin to stop actually representing American perspectives in those discussions. I think the Trump administration is demonstrating that they're going to prevail in this fight with Harvard. I know that people think Harvard has over $50 billion in endowment and they're, have the status and this history. That's all true, but the federal government is bigger and richer and will prevail here in this fight. And I think Harvard understands that. And really all that they're doing is positioning for a better deal. And so the litigation that Harvard has been pursuing is just to try to get a better agreement with the administration. And I suspect that's ultimately where we're going to end up. There will be an agreement between Harvard and the Trump administration, and it will be a reasonable deal that will allow Harvard to move forward and offer a quality education. So none of this is catastrophic. It is just a fight for positioning for a better deal for each side.
Okay, I want to pause it right there because he's the only one in the videos that I looked at that talked about this positioning for a better deal. Everything else is a little sensationalism. Look what they're doing to the Jews. Look what they're doing to the Afghanis or the Middle Easterners. Look at what they're doing to the Chinese. Oh my God, our money, blah, 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 blah. And it comes down to, in this researcher's guy's narrative, a position that this is just about Harvard and the administration working to get a better deal. But it is being put into the courts, and today's the 25th. So on the 27th, that's when that court case, I believe, is going to start hitting from the judge having that injunction on it. Okay, so I really wanted to play that because I was like, yeah, if we see the Asian guy be like, fuck that, da 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 da, and they da 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 da, we never hear what and I believe the dude is Jewish, what Mr. Green said. And I'll just say it that way to keep his ethnicity out of it. But he's the only one in these videos who said that. Okay. And I really want us to remember that part because we're dealing with, if you guys remember, let me shoot this out there. I said it some years ago when I stumbled across it, how when you see these state governments being formed back in the day with Randolph and all those people who were in the old government, the beginning of the government, you would see three things emerge when they move through the country, if you would. You would see the government entity, and then you would see a university, those agricultural grants, college grants, and then you would also, if you look around, you would see the Masonic Lodge. Those were the three things that I saw that was like, what? I never thought about this, So, these universities have contracted for certain things within the government narrative, if you would. And Harvard, of course, is one of them. Yale, is, of course, is one of them. If you guys remember me talking about when I looked at some of the universities, that as soon as the United States declared their independence in the 1700s, some of these universities went private. Okay? So when this guy says they're looking for a better deal, don't throw that away for the sensationalism of journalism that is used sometimes to prey on the emotions of the audience and the listeners. Okay, again, 1776 project and the 1619 project. Okay, but they ain't talking about the 1619 project, of course. Throw the shit out there. Throw a piece of meat to the dogs and watch them devour it. And even like how they say with one group of people who will remain nameless, that basically if they put you in a room and there's no air and you're gonna and you would suffocate because there was no oxygen in that room, eventually you'll absorb all the oxygen. They would say that they didn't unalive you. It was basically the circumstances to which you were in, like the room that they locked you in. So they're looking at plausible deniability. So be careful of the sensationalism, the emotional manipulation that goes on out.
Trump administration's imposition of a ban on Harvard accepting and keeping overseas students is absolutely
Testing. Hopefully you guys can hear me because we lost the computer and the phone. We lost the volume on the computer and the phone. Just died on me. Let me see what happens here.
the enormous attack,
Here we
both
go.
on Harvard and on academic independence and integrity. In terms of the institution, Harvard is a university of something like a bit over 20,000 students, I think 22,000 or so. And about 6,000 to 7,000 of them are overseas students. It means nearly a third of Harvard's students would suddenly face the question of whether they would be able to stay on at Harvard. And of course, the impact on Harvard's finance would be pretty devastating. And that is absolutely intentional. And the message was also sent that other academic institutions should look at Harvard and therefore behave, in quotation marks, in accordance with what the administration wishes. So you can't really have a more blatant assault on academic independence and academic integrity. Well, what Harvard is facing is nearly existential. And therefore, I cannot see any other option but for Harvard to fight back and challenge it in the courts and potentially asking for an injunction to stop the order from the administration, at least until the case has been heard and ruled by the US courts system. The alternative is to completely cave in which case it really would have very salutary effect on the entire US higher education sector. And it would also cause universities in other democracies to be very concerned. If something like that can happen in the United States, then we can no longer be complacent to think that, oh, it just can't happen to us. The United States is still a country where the rule of law prevails. There is the recourse for Harvard to the US court system, the judicial system, and it is very, very likely that they will succeed in getting an injunction against the order of the Trump administration. So I would not expect the overwhelming majority of Harvard students already in place trying to move to another institution. Where I think you will have more of an impact will be the students recruited for the coming academic year. And you will have students who are admitted by Harvard, whether at the undergraduate level or at the postgraduate level, who would also have offers from other very, very good universities. And there is a risk that a good percentage of them may decide that instead of going to Harvard, they will go to one of Harvard's rivals, which can be, and more likely than not, located in the United States itself.
If I saw that driving down the road, I would be excited. Like, that's Harvard? Okay, we're going to skip this. She did have something to say. She had something to say right about here.
Defer my
Okay. She did have something to say right here. This is, that whole little segment that we just jumped over was just basically she's gotten accepted to Harvard. They're giving her, the hat and the cup and the this and the that and all that other stuff. She's a student. She's excited about it. And, she has something to say. It's not really major, but you have to realize she's a student. She's just now entering in, even though she's educated because she's going to Harvard. She's completed whatever she needed to complete. But yet she doesn't really know all the stuff like we who've lived here in America in this political environment. Okay. So she's talking from her perspective of how she's looking at what her future is going to be. And she's not critical of this. So I think they used her for a reason, just to show what some of the new foreign students would have to or are experiencing, which again is a human thing, a human interest thing more than a ethnic, racial type thing. Okay. Behind her, I think there is a gentleman who is Taiwanese. Yeah, the guy that's Taiwanese. So I'm going to let those two play out from what she's saying here, what he has to say about it, how he's addressing it. But at the same time, they're both like new students coming over, if you would. I think he's been here a little bit longer than her at this particular point. And in that, he's trying to address things on his level, but not. He's pretty. He talked about American generosity. The president being Trump being generous. And so he's not coming over here talking about Americans are screwed up and they're stupid and this and none of that stuff. They're just talking about what they're trying to go through, especially the gentleman at the end, and how he wants to go back and help his country. But they're also talking, and you may hear this a couple times come out, about how other places around the world offering these students to go to their universities, like France and Europe, and I think one of them say Europe and the UK. I don't know if those are two different damn places or not, but anyway. So that's what the latter part of this is, but I wanted you to hear the first part. And in relationship to Milestones. Hey, the man. And in a relationship to Milestones comment right here, uh, they try to put a footprint on the land and make us the foreigner when we can see that they are foreigners. Yeah, they've been migrating or immigrating people in here for the longest, right? But here's the thing. Let me. How you get this shit off? Okay, but here's the thing about it. If you, what they call them, locals, you just put that in your mindset about how they talk about locals, like, local yokels and all this other stuff, and how, you just doing your thing, but you're close to a university and or a college, and people come into that college and it's a bunch of stuff going on, but they look at you because you're a local, and you're looking at them because they're in your environment, and it's just something that I thought about. I know I went through one town, coming down from the northwest, and back roads and northwest, and no signal and all this other stuff, and it's like, damn, I didn't know this city was over. This is a big ass city and a lot of damn people and a lot of cars, and then you looked in the city that I can't remember the city, but you got the Starbucks, and you got this restaurant that I've never heard of, and this steakhouse, and you know this bookstore, and just all kind of businesses there, and it was all there because of the school being in that area, that college being in that area. It was a college town, but in the midst of that, you had a bunch of locals, that were living amongst this, like even where I live, right? Well, not where I live now, but where I lived before. When I first moved to the area, we had George Air Force Base out here, and the town where we were at, um, it was like a retirement town. It was kind of known for a retirement town, but they had a military base here. And so, in that time when I moved here, it was like things were going on because the military was here. Okay, it was a certain standard that was here because the military was here, but then you had your locals who weren't in the military, didn't have that access, that connection, that couldn't write on there, I'm a veteran, or I've been in the armed forces or anything. And some of those got pushed to the background for the military people that were here, giving them first call at certain things, right? Well, when that base left, and I went over there about a month and a half ago, just drove through there, and I wanted to take y'all through there to see what has happened to George Air Force Base. We can't go all up in it into the neighborhood, but I mean, it is stripped, it's nasty, it's abandoned, all this stuff, and it's just crazy because I remember when the families were still there and when it was going on, and you still had people at the gates who, you know, you had to have a pass or an escort to go in there, and this, that, and the other, and then, like I said, George Air Force Base moved, and then there was a fight between the two cities who was going to take over that property, Adelanto or Victorville, and put an air they put an airport, like a logistics airport there, not a commercial one. My son worked over there painting planes and shit, and my second trucking job was also on that site. But that's after they moved, and then after they moved, now you got all kinds of other things coming up on. Like, for example, we talk about locals in this aspect. You get disenfranchised for people coming in, like military students. As educated, um, in order to take those higher positions and take the lower positions. These are just things that I've seen, um, just being here. So I was just thinking about that local connection of local yokels, and people from all over, or even people being on the campus themselves who go to Harvard, who are from here, that they're almost invisible, possibly invisible at one point to all the foreigners that may be there. And this is just me speculating. I've never been to Harvard. But how sometimes people may look at the people who are really from here, Americans, in a, you know, they may over scrutinize them, if you would. They may over scrutinize them. I think I just lost the computer. This is going to be a crazy ass day. Yep, I just lost the computer. Try to get that back in. But, they may over scrutinize them, especially our folks, because they have a tendency, people, not they, but some people have a tendency to look at our folks like, we don't know anything. Like I was telling my stepdaughter on last night, um, sometimes they look, one group looks at the other group, and I can't get the specifics of it to you, but look at them like you don't measure up. And, they'll always have that opinion about you because, a white woman may look at a black woman and say, I'm better than you because I'm white, or whatever the case is, or male or female. And we see those things happen just by the course of human nature sometimes. And so even like with the movie I, Robot, one of my favorite lines from I, Robot is, why do they group up like that? And that's when you had the older robots in the storage containers and the newer robots that were being created that was going to turn on the people. You could see them all group up in one side, like the older ones would group up to one side in the storage container. And that's when he said, why do they group up like that? And that's what we do. We group up with, who we resonate with. And so foreigners as well as locals or Americans can do the same things, but sometimes for the miseducation, we can be looked at in a very negative light, overcritical. I mean, one person can do the same thing as another person does, but yet because you got a preconceived notion about that one person, um, you don't judge it the same way. Okay, same two things can be said. It's like I think it was a movie one time, and I don't mean to make this racial, but there was a movie, or someone had said it in a movie. I think I've heard it on social media as well, where they give you this story, this tragic ass story, and because that person is like you, meaning I think the story was about I hate to say it, but let's just say the story was about you as a melanated person, and then you feel some kind of way like, how that's fucked up and this should happen and da 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 and da da da, and you really got a lot of opinion, and then at the end of it they say, now imagine if the person was white, and you don't feel the same way, or vice versa. They start out with the person being being white, and you don't have that feeling. But when they say, now imagine a person was black, you can feel that inside when you change that narrative to identify your own biases and prejudices when it comes out. And this is problematic because people have really used that, to keep us there sometimes, to keep us in that mindset sometimes. So, long as we know who we are, we're not foreigner. They can say what they want to, they can come from where they want to, but like they say in physics, it's the two things cannot occupy the same space at the same time. Everywhere I place my feet is ground to my reward. And like I was telling my daughter-in-law last night, I said, look at your fingerprint. We were talking about astrology, things about astrology, and well, I give you the long version. So we were talking about her dad and myself, back in the day. And I said, well, he's a Scorpio. I said, I'm a Scorpio too. She's like, yeah, I kind of know, or however, right? And then I was like, my moon sign is a Leo. I said, you're a Leo, right? She said, yeah, I'm a Leo. Da da da. I said, my moon sign is a Leo. And so we were just joking about that because we're talking about Scorpios being stubborn and shit. And I said, I got both of y'all, And then I had to try to tell her how everything just isn't black and white. That it's like shades of color, if you would. Sun and the moon. We're just talking about astrology. But what about colors? I said, if you have red and blue, if you put those together, what do you get? And I was like, that's one, violet or purple. But at the same time, if you put, I think it is green and yellow together or yellow and blue together, one or two. I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, I think yellow and green, you might get blue. So there are different nuances. I said it's not black and white, it's all those shades in between. So, but some people want us to be polarized. It's like one of these videos we'll look at, you can actually hear the polarization that's being played on people. Let me get this computer back in. Okay. Let's bring the computer back to the stage. There we go. All right. You said sisters labeled as Latin are spicy and saucy, while sisters labeled black are viewed as loudmouth and ratchet. Yeah, yeah. You say she joking with me off of opinion that I had. Okay, what you say up here? Italians are angry and good, while people labeled as black okay, and it's pre-programmed by the U.S. media outlets. Yeah, I see you. Okay, and milestones. I hope you ain't on no bullshit when you say she joking with me off of opinion that I had. Uh, I'm just responding to what you said, so I hope you're not trying to, get all mental, if you would. Okay, because I don't have time for that shit. Okay. Uh, so let's pull this video in. Did I say everything I wanted to say? I think it was something else I wanted to say on that, but I can't remember. So let me bag this up to homegirl and see if we can get her in here so y'all can hear these two people talk. Is it right here? Okay, somewhere right in here. Okay. Yeah, I got told I was a totalitarian last night, so hey, it is what it is. I always knew I was bossy. Okay, okay.
Here. However,
Let's
this
see
one
what we
is
got.
specific,
Let's bag it up a
specific
second.
targeted the half year. However, this in a way as what we have gone, I could accept all the changes along the way as
Oh
yeah.
shit,
So
I'm
that's
trying
why
to
I
get it,
think this one
y'all.
is actually harder and tougher than I expected. There are so many uncertainties and yeah. So that's why I think I thought that I could accept all the changes along the way as what we have gone through in the past half year. However, this one is specifically targeted the international students, so I kind of feel like really hit by it, and that's why I feel kind of anxious. And but I really couldn't do much. Just wait and see. I think I will either defer my studies in Harvard, as they said. That's one of the possibilities, or I will probably apply for master programs in Europe or the UK.
We're certainly feeling pretty nervous, and it's been a dream for me to come from a small town in Taiwan all the way to Harvard. And the preparation is not limited to TOEFL and all the standardized tests or even the documents we present in the statement of purpose, but it includes a set of preparations, including accumulating experiences in leadership, in community service when we are in our undergraduate years. It is exceptionally vital in medical school because medical school is striving to help people all around the world, not limited to one specific country or ethnicity. So at this point of time, I'm trying to remain as positive and optimistic. it's not our job to be here and act like our stuffs were taken away. Rather, we're actually actively trying to find solutions to the problem, including, for my case, the public health study I want to do. Perhaps I can start by looking for local resources here in my home country, and perhaps I can incorporate those findings when I go to the Boston and get my studies, so as to mitigate the losses and opportunities I may have when I actually be in Harvard. And the problem that me and a lot of our peers were studying in the Ivy League or in other universities were trying to acquire the skills that can benefit us in our home country, and we can go back and make a meaningful change to our society. And I think that this is the best that the United States can offer. So I would like to plead to the president that please, I hope that this continuous generosity can be continued.
All right, we got one more video. I just wanted y'all to hear what their take on it was. You know, just some of the students. Looks like he's not even in the country, but might be in an offshoot Harvard campus somewhere else or something like that. One of their affiliates elsewhere. Because I saw the writing on the wall as he walked in. Ooh, okay, let's look and see. There should be another one in here. Okay, I guess I'll stop screen sharing with y'all so y'all don't know all my business. Hold on a second. All right, let me see. Then we got one more. Let's move this out the way. One, two. Did we look at this one? Sounds like we looked. Okay, this is the other one. Okay. These they kind of got on my nerves with this one, but let's bring this one in. I think I'm missing one. I hate when you do that. I don't know if y'all know, but when you're listening to something, you hit that next link sometimes that's on the screen, and you watch the video, it doesn't register. Sometimes it doesn't register in your history. So I thought it was one more that I was looking at, but we'll go to this one here. All right, let's share that with you guys. And I don't know what's going on with that.
It's going to
Okay, here we go.
Immensely. Almost a quarter, 25% of their enrollment is international students. And Secretary Noem pointed out that Harvard is very wealthy and that they will be fine without this tuition to, as she put it, pad their endowment. So I just want to make clear that tuition dollars don't go into endowments. Tuition money is used for things like student aid, student programs, payroll, paying staff, paying faculty. And so the loss of tuition is not going to hurt Harvard's endowment. It's going to hurt their ability to take care of the students, faculty, and staff that they have. Secretary Noem, either in her letter or in a recent statement, has said, I'm not quoting directly, but that Harvard is a hotbed of dissent, of anti-Semitism, and it somehow harbors future terrorists, perhaps. And so they're using that. This is why it's coming through Homeland Security and not another agency. They're saying that the international students at Harvard are somehow a threat to the security of the United States.
I mean, obviously, schools have had their SEVIS registration terminated, but it's usually for fraud or they just don't keep records. They've never done it for anything remotely like this, which basically is, we don't like the fact that you're not listening to about who you should hire, so we're going to terminate it. That's what they did here. But perhaps this was not necessarily just about Harvard. This was a message to all of higher education that you have to come into line with the thinking of what this administration thinks higher education should be. going to see, clearly what we're going to see is a massive drop-off in foreign students coming to the United States starting in September. Well, I think a lot of the administration sees universities as a hotbed of liberals, progressives, people that are aligned against the principles of MAGA. And to them, it's a breeding ground. They see it as a breeding ground. So if you can disrupt the breeding ground, you won't have as many progressive, i.e. educated people who oppose the administration's nationalism and nativism. But what's also going to happen is the students and the researchers that have been coming to the United States since the end of World War II are now being courted by France. They're being courted by Germany. They're being courted by Canada. They're being courted by China. Hey, why go to the United States? Those people are crazy over there. We will fund your research in France. We will fund your research in China. Come here. Again, but overall, there's 1.2 million students in the United States. I mean, there's a lot of foreign students here, many of them keeping schools afloat. Not only do foreign students bring to the campus, university, this international interaction with American citizen students that are there, but they also provide massive funding because they all pay full tuition. So tuition will go up for U.S. citizens at almost every university if we didn't have foreign students. Will 100% go up. This is
Looks like they just
very
started some
large
shit.
endowment
Okay.
would cause Harvard to
There you
then
go.
owe a tremendous amount of money in taxes, again, hampering research.
But tax exempt status, I mean, it's a privilege. It's really a privilege. And it's been abused by a lot more than Harvard, too, by a lot more than Harvard. So we'll see how that all works out. I don't think
Just the requests that they're making of Harvard and other universities, doing what are called viewpoint surveys on both faculty and students, trying to find out ideological beliefs, any sort of political activities. Those have not been seen in the United States for quite some time. Certainly during McCarthyism and the Red Scare, people were more inquisitive, to put it nicely, about people's political views and the World War and most of the 21st century, America has prided itself on freedom of speech, freedom of thought. And in a recent report, Harvard did admit that there's been a problem with anti-Semitism on their campus, and they are looking into ways to mitigate that. Of course, nobody wants anti-Semitism. There's no place for that in the United States. They've recently, I think the number is about $2.75 billion that they have immediately taken from Harvard. Harvard, of course, is requesting that they be allowed to keep those funds. Faculty at Harvard are very concerned, talking about how the revocation of that amount of funds, what that's going to do is essentially shut down some of their labs. We've talked about how universities in America are vital for all kinds of research, but particularly scientific research that leads to medical discoveries, advances in technology. And so revoking those funds without a very clear reason or without a is incredibly harmful to Harvard.
billions of dollars has been paid to Harvard. How ridiculous is that? Billions.
U.S. President Donald Trump spoke on Friday after a U.S. judge temporarily blocked his administration from revoking Harvard University's ability to enroll foreign students.
Harvard's going to have to change its ways. And so are some others.
His comments came after an order that provides temporary relief to the thousands of international students who were faced with being forced to transfer, following the termination of Harvard's Student and Exchange Visitor Program certification, and after Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem accused the university without providing evidence of, quote, fostering violence, anti-Semitism, and coordinating with the Chinese Communist Party. The Ivy League school, which rejected the allegations, filed a lawsuit on Friday calling the revocation.
Right there, when they said what this Noem person, Noem, that's crazy. Troll. I'm sorry, my bad. My Tourette's kicked in. Just that part when they're talking about that she made these criticisms without proof. That's the same way those two executive orders were expressed to us, as far as the journalists in the 1619 project critiquing in the Biden administration, tabling and critiquing the executive order in the Trump administration when you're dealing with journalists versus people who have PhDs in particular disciplines evaluating this stuff. Okay, and I know some of us out here are all forget a person with a degree, they this, that, and the other, and blah blah blah. I'm sorry, when it comes to things that I want done, I don't want it done by the layperson who don't know shit. Okay, and the one thing that we have that we've been barred from in this grand scheme of things is access. Okay. Like I said, I'm not going to Harvard, and probably many of the people who are listening to my channel and will be called to judge this from a lay position aren't going to these Ivy League universities. You know, as the Taiwanian guy mentioned Ivy League, it reminded me of a poem that I had back in the day, and I can only remember a couple lines, but I said, there was no Ivy League universities to inspect the mental neglect imposed on me, but life had been my teacher, showing me that the world can be a cold, cruel place. That's about as much as I remember of that poem. And so, you know, we're not in these institutions, but because they like to play this majority rule and public opinion, this, that, and the other, some of us, for not knowing what's going on, can again be emotional and actually sway the narrative and allow people to use the narrative. Because when it comes out, I think it's in this post here as well, that, you know, they're talking about they want to look at who has some type of, who have supported terrorist organizations. I said, that sounds good on the surface, but what if you get that one person in some office who are reviewing a list of names and they don't look at each and every name right, and they just say, well, who did this? Well, here's the list. Okay, and they push the whole list through. How many people that are foreign exchange students could get caught up on a list being seen as being terrorists because somebody in an administration position didn't um, research, evaluate, and verify um, the names that were on the list. So that's one of the dangers that I see about this thing just being pushed forward. Okay. Okay. Got you, the man. I don't know where Westwood, California. Okay. But yeah, that tax exempt part was, I was like, yeah, they got that tax exemption. They got tax exemption, and it's about taxes and revenues and a better deal, like that one dude said, you know. Um, so, you know, there's some business shit. Like the person said in here, right here, you know, it's a marketing ploy. So pay attention to that, because, you know, they get us to do shit. You know, they get us to do shit um, for being opinionated about things. I'm just sharing information so that you guys can be aware when the shit comes down, because we're going to see this hit again, not only through the summer with the court cases, but we're going to see it hit again in September when people go back to school. And depending on how long that court case and appeal goes on, it'll probably be something that's talked about later, you know, later on as well into next year, all through Trump's administration. And I make that point because I didn't find out about the 1776 project until like 2 months ago, or within the past 2 months. But in looking at the 1619 project and the 1776 project, this was something that was going on all through Biden's administration. But on our side of the aisle, meaning the social media side of the aisle, we were steady talking about Pan-Africanism and if we're Aborigines. And there were some words or phrases that were mentioned in one of those projects, you know. If we're slave, because if we're slave, we're talking 1619, okay? If we're in the government, we're pretty much talking 1776. But there were things that were mentioned over the course of the years that let me know somebody knew that this was about the 1776 project and the 19 project, but they didn't let us know within media that that's what it was about. Okay, because when you realize what the 1619 project is, how they're pushing it, how it's played, and where it shows up, you realize that this is what's been going on the whole time. But because we were so inundated with Trump getting his felony charges and who's, what Kamala was doing and Biden was doing through that 4 year fiasco, these things weren't put to the foreground like they should have been. And this deals with us being knowledgeable of the things that are going on, not just the opinions that people have and our own biases, if you would. Okay, so let's continue. It's almost done, and then we'll get to the reading, and hopefully we can do the reading because the screen keeps popping in and out, and stalling and stuff. So let's play the last part of this.
A blatant violation of the U.S. Constitution and other federal laws. Steve Tsang, the director of the SOAS China Institute, called the move by the current administration an attack on both Harvard and academic independence.
It means nearly a third of Harvard students would suddenly face the question of whether they would be able to stay on at Harvard. And of course, the impact on Harvard's finance would be pretty devastating. The message was also sent that other academic institutions should look at Harvard and therefore behave, in quotation marks, in accordance with what the administration wishes. So you can't really have a more blatant assault on academic independence and academic integrity.
The judge blocked the policy for 2 weeks, saying Harvard had shown it could be harmed before there was an opportunity to hear the case in full. The Trump administration may appeal the ruling. Trump's pressure on Harvard is part of the Republican president's broader campaign to compel universities, law firms, news media, courts, and other institutions that value independence from partisan politics to align with his agenda. Harvard, based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, has pushed back hard against Trump, having previously sued to restore some $3 billion in federal grants that had been frozen or canceled.
Okay. And you see how they're saying that Harvard jumped out and said this or pushed against it before it could even be substantiated that they were going to be harmed. But yeah, I hope that's the way that it said it. I could play it back just to catch it. Um, let's see if it's right here. It was something else that they said in there too. Well, they didn't say it, but just when they put the Asian guy back up here on this news station to use his clip, I was like, this is about the staff not getting their money, okay? Because if that tuition from the foreign exchange students don't go for the endowment, but it goes for student services, staff, and faculty and all that stuff, then the people who are really going to be harmed and really looking at what's going on is the staff, okay? The professors, this, that, and the other. But like back in the 70s, how they pushed the young folks to get society moving on the Black Power politics of the late 60s and 70s, when it was other people behind it who had agendas, okay, as we have come to find out in the recent months. But let me play this part again, just so y'all can hear that one little section. Okay, right here. I think it's right here.
It had shown it could be harmed before there was an opportunity to hear the case in full. The policy for 2 weeks, saying Harvard had shown it could be harmed before there was an opportunity to hear the case in full. The Trump administration may appeal the ruling. Trump's pressure on Harvard is part of the Republican president's broader campaign to compel universities, law firms, news media, courts, and other institutions that value independence from partisan politics to align with his agenda. Harvard, based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, has pushed back hard against Trump, having previously sued to restore some $3 billion in federal grants that had been frozen or canceled.
Oh shit. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you. I was saying to man, I read your statement right there about the 990 filing and you bringing evidence to substantiate your claim. I said, do that and tag me in it so that I can come over there and listen to what you're talking about as far as that's concerned, and also share that information for those who are also interested in knowing about this thing with Harvard and the education system. I also said that I know some of us, this is about where our children are going to be in the future, how they're going to, y'all remember the statement, you should remember the statement when it said something about don't worry about them picking ninnies, they're not going to compete, or even I think it was in the Pale Horse book, I'm not sure, where it was talking about that they weren't going to have any more scholars and heads and philosophers and all of this stuff coming out of our community. And we can't let that stand. We have to make sure that our children are able to compete, that they're on the level that they need to be on from preschool to graduate school. Okay. And for those who, like myself, who didn't go to the universities, and those who are like, I'm not going to the universities, get as many certificates and skills under your belt as you can. That's the one thing that I can say as an older woman looking back at decisions I've made and decisions I've seen other people make and the struggles that they have, is that, like right now with trucking, there's three fucking fields, excuse my language, there's three fields, three areas of study that I wanted to do back in the day, and had I done those, it would have benefited me on this end. Okay, accounting was one, business administration, which is where I dropped out of school at, and the other one was welding. All three of those would have worked for me here. Okay, and then my dad, my husband, and all that, they were mechanics, and some people had suggested because I had small hands that I could do that too, because I don't mind getting dirty and working on vehicles, but I need the people that's gonna help me. Like, what the fuck is this, and how is this? Because like with me, just to put this out here, I was telling somebody this the other day. I said, like with me, there are things that I studied even in high school, but my mother couldn't afford. My daddy wasn't paying, and my mother couldn't afford the supplies needed. Like building small airplanes. You know, that helps you to understand mechanics. We're talking about being engineers, this, that, and the other at some particular point, but we have to be able to sacrifice for our children so that they can learn those things, so they can get access to the greater information in relationship to it, so that they can take care of their families in the future and leave a legacy, rather than having the same conversation about how we messed up, they did this, they did that, we're not in this position, and we gods and kings and shit. um that causes us to be laughed at, because where's your kingdom, king? Okay. But anyway, leave that alone. So those were two of the things that I had said as far as that was concerned. And the last thing, while I had no sound, was we're going to transition right now. I'm going to play my niece's song, Trauma, that just released this week, her single. And we'll play that again. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to grab this 1619 book and see if I can find this paragraph one more time, just to read out about the 1619 1776 project. I want to keep that in the foreground, because this is something that we can affect. Okay, kicking all the foreigners out, we can't do that. Making every so-called white person bow down and kiss our feet, okay, we can't do that. Okay, putting people back in slavery because we Hebrew Israelites and that's what the Bible said, we can't do that. Okay, um you can't get the salt out the salt water, you got to dehydrate the damn water. Okay. No. So let me get ready, let me do this transition, let me find my niece and play her for you, get all this other stuff off of here, and then we'll get to the reading. Okay, and I'm gonna do some reading. I'm feeling pretty good now, but I do have some business to attend to today as far as the trucking company is concerned. I'll probably get my last credential, hopefully Tuesday, no later than Wednesday, so I can start rolling. Okay, go do what I gotta do. Let me see if I can find her. All right, let's get her on the screen for us, and hopefully they won't block my shit. They're probably gonna try to copyright strike my ass. Let's share her video.
Trauma, a deeply distressing or disturbing experience.
Ain't no need to panic, I know where I'm headed. Remember I said it, just keep in mind how you treated me, cause I promise you'll never forget it. Now physical wounds may heal, but I know the trauma's embedded. I get tired of trying to sit still, acting all calm and collected, cause I know shit can get real. I know how I am, so I try to dead it. I told you 1,000 times, chill. How the fuck do you not get the message? These niggas swear they so real. In real life, they really just reckless. It's hard to swallow those pills when you know that they full of deception. It's cold, high moment of stressing. Put you close to depression. Plan for the future, stuck in the past. It's hard to cope with the present when you don't know how to let go. It make it real hard to move on from the lesson. And you ain't nothing like them. So you can't just take any suggestions. If you grow up with a lot of neglect, everything feel like a threat. First you start off real nervous, but then you learn how to step. But you still don't know what to expect. It's just hard to accept that this just is what it is. Hell nah, I ain't going for that. Cause it's trauma, post-traumatic. Why make it so dramatic? It's trauma, it's post-traumatic. Why make it so erratic? It's trauma, post-traumatic trauma, post-traumatic trauma, post-traumatic, post-traumatic. I've been going through trauma since birth. That's part of the curse. Mama don't want me, daddy don't want me. Damn, is that what I'm worth? Life just had to throw me a curve. These grandma snatched me and had me in church. And I really feel bad for my other sisters, cause honestly, they had it worse. This life's not real, they got it rehearsed. It's not skill, they copying words. In the way some of y'all be treating y'all kids, that shit really got me concerned. Never had nothing real, that's not what I learned. At least not till I got me a turn. But to this day in my relationships, I still feel like I'm not being heard. See, it's hard to outrun a memory. That shit could get menacing, going in and out and back and forth inside your head like a tennis ring. Now it's me against the world, and I feel like I don't need anything. I start getting into things, getting out, getting things, which only made me want bigger things. Now I'm walking around like I'm fixing things, till God threw me in the thick of things. Like stop, it's not how I intended things. And it's not a little thing, cause for you, L, I got bigger things. Now I know what that really means. I gotta get through this by any means, cause it's trauma, post-traumatic. Why make it so dramatic? It's trauma, it's post-traumatic. Why make it so erratic? It's trauma, post-traumatic trauma, post-traumatic trauma, post-traumatic, post-traumatic, it's trauma, post-traumatic. Why make it so dramatic? It's trauma, it's post-traumatic. Why make it so erratic? It's trauma, post-traumatic trauma, post-traumatic trauma, post-traumatic trauma.
Hello? Man, I just got out the line for crazy.
Man, I just got out the motherfucking crazy house. You know what I mean? Oh shit. Hey Suzanne. Hey Philly. Hey Focus Mind. Sorry I hadn't spoken to you guys. Welcome to the room, darling. Okay. So I did find a paragraph in this book that I did want to say as far as the 1719, but we're gonna do more than a paragraph because I want y'all to hear this for those who haven't. We're probably gonna do about 6 paragraphs, and that should be enough. Okay. Let me see. Is that good? No, we're gonna do this first section, the 1776 project in perspective. Listen to this so y'all catch it, because this is when we were having those conversations about critical race theory, okay, that they tabled, not teaching our history and all that. All of that shit is wrapped up in this narrative right here, okay. So let me read a couple things for you. So this is by Gary DeMar. It says, the day Joe Biden was sworn in as president of the United States, the 1776 report from former President Donald Trump's advisory 1776 commission disappeared from the White House website. The 1776 report was a needed response to the New York Times Magazine 1619 project that claimed that slavery was the operational foundation upon which the United States was founded. The United States was unofficially founded in 1776 with the drafting and signing of the Declaration of Independence, and formally established in 1791 when the states voted to adopt the United States Constitution and its attendant Bill of Rights as their national governing document. There was no United States in 1619. Some may see this as a technicality, but it's an important point of historical accuracy. Bringing together 13 diverse colonies with their unique histories, constitutions, and operating governments was not an easy task. The past could not be changed, but going forward, a newly formed government could rectify some injustices and work towards laying the groundwork for resolving others. Criticism, and this is going into the part that I wanted y'all to hear. Criticisms of the 1776 Commission were swift and harsh. Quote, in a headline on its website, CNN labeled the report a, quote, racist school curriculum, end quote. The New York Times called it a, quote, sweeping attack on liberal thought and activism, end quote. They got one out of the two right. It was a sweeping attack on liberal thought and activism, but it was not meant to be a school curriculum. The criticisms were not left unanswered. After Biden's action, the 1776 Commission responded with a joint statement from its chairman, Dr. Larry P. Arnn, A-R-N-N, the president of Hillsdale College, prominent conservative African-American scholar Dr. Carol Swain, S-W-A-I-N, retired professor of Vanderbilt Law School, and Dr. Matthew Spalding, the vice president and dean of the School of Government of Hillsdale's DC campus. Okay. They wrote, quote, the 1776 report calls for a return to the unifying ideas or ideals stated in the Declaration of Independence. It quotes the greatest Americans, black and white, men and women, in devotion to these ideals. The Commission may be abolished, but these principles in our history cannot be. We will all continue to work together to teach and defend them, end quote. One of the criticisms, and this is the main point that I wanted to get to, but we'll read this section. One of the criticisms of the 1776 project is that it was not produced by professional historians. This is a curious critique since the principal author of the 1619 project, Nicole Hannah Jones's degree is in journalism. She does not have a PhD in history, and yet she won a Pulitzer Prize for her work claiming that the nation's founding began with the arrival of the first slave ship in North America. She teaches at UNC Chapel Hill, Hussman School of Journalism and Media. Her work demonstrates that a person does not have to have a degree in history to work in the field of history. Her investigative work led her to claim that the United States has always been hopelessly racist and irredeemable given today's political standards. The past must be obliterated to make way for a new future, but on what ultimate standard? The 1776 project was not meant to be a history curriculum. Dr. Swain had this to say about some of the comments made by critics of the report. Quote, they misunderstood the purpose of the commission. We were not writing for academic scholars. It was never meant to be a comprehensive report. We did want to address that part of today's public debate as exemplified by the 1619 project. This end quote. The 1619 project has its share of criticisms. For example, Damon Linker, writing in The Week, the magazine The Week, argued that the paper treated history, the paper by the journalists, treated history in a highly sensationalistic, reductionistic, and tendentious way, and the cumulative result resembling a git prop more than responsible journalism or scholarship. Last paragraph, and I'm gonna go back in there and get that word a get prop for you guys again. It says nearly all those who worked on the 1776 report have advanced degrees in history, law, philosophy, government, and classics, while the 1619 project was mostly developed by a single person. The 1776 report was a collaborative effort made up of people with varied absolutional and racial backgrounds, experience, and expertise. Again, this in this in itself does not absolve the 1776 report from criticism, but it does mitigate some of those outrageous charges made against those who worked on the project and the project itself. That's important for um, you got one voice that's saying this is what it is, get the Pulitzer Prize, when you got several disciplines, including the classics, that are trying to tell you what it ain't. Because what they like to do is pigeonhole us here in America and not let us look at world history. And they like to keep us on this black white agenda, okay, or even a male agenda, so that we won't know who all played a part in this to stop things from happening that are now happening in this political arena. Let me look up the word get prop for you. Okay. Let me get that word and see if I can put that on the screen for you. Because I was like, what the hell is a get prop? Okay. Let me share that with y'all. Because one of the ways that they get us again is through language. I'm gonna stick on that until I can't stick on that no more. They get us through language. When we don't do the proper things that we need to do with language, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Okay. And this is one of the things that we have to address, especially if we're talking about foreign people. Okay. Yeah, I get it. I get it, the man. It is. But, there's no neutrality in this. Okay. Oh, shoot, I can't get that off. So here's the definition for a get prop. It says political propaganda, especially favoring communism and dissemination through literature, drama, art, or music. Two, agitation, and it's the noun, I'm sorry. Agitation, number two, agitation and propaganda, used especially for such activities carried out on behalf of communist activists. And number three, a person who disseminates messages calculated to assist some cause or some government, one disseminating a get prop, also called a get propist. Okay? We just dumbed down to a propagandist. Right. And see, so those things right there again go back to, well, we're going to be reading some of it, the problem with the Age of Enlightenment, but some of those go back to uh, the Lyceum movement, the Chautauqua movement, how we were educated in other areas where these schools weren't, through art and drama and theater. It goes back to the mythologies, the philosophies and the mythologies having a story, a message in that story. It goes back to the religion, that some of these stories that we were told to remember in religion, if you would, had a message in it, but nobody came back and broke that message down. It led way to a lot of these secret societies and the hiding of knowledge. It also had to do with thieves' cant and argots. In other words, people having a conversation right in front of you and double speaking, and you don't know what the hell they're speaking about. And for those who don't have that access, that understanding, and that awareness, they're ripe for the picking to be pulled to one side or the other to serve some political agenda or propaganda. It also ties into the African blood brotherhood, where one journalist pushed an agenda that was driven for the communist agenda, where the communist people, if you would, had a Negro agenda or a Negro program where they were going to use our folks from as early as 100 years ago, or continuing from 100 years ago. We're going to use our people's dissatisfaction with what happened to them when they came back from the war in America to serve their own communist agenda. We've been played on many levels. Okay. So I just want people to have it. and understand that I can't change people's minds, but what we can do is give them awareness, and then when you know, they can make the decision. You know, I'm nobody. I don't have a degree. I didn't have all this information. I just stumble across shit and go, that's interesting, and where, what, why, when, how, you know, and all that stuff, which is what we're supposed to do with all of this stuff. Not just believe what they said because they said it or some authority said it, but say it because, or understand it, or address it, or whatever the case is, because you yourself have researched it, that you are autodidactic, self-learning, and you're able to look at information through a bias, an unbiased eye, to pull out the truth of it, or should I say, the irradiation of it, to pull out the scholarship, if you would. All right, so um, let's get to the book. Okay, let's get to the book. All right, but that's what I wanted to share with y'all because it's all tied together. All right, so let's stop here. Let me see if I can actually find a cover for the book or something so y'all can look at it. This is the book that we're going to be going into, and I can't do my phone the way I need to do it. So, of Enlightenment. Give me a second, y'all. The problem of enlightenment. Oh, wait. No, I did that wrong. That's the Treatise of the Three Impostors. Remember, they found this book, or found whatever manuscript they found. The story goes they found it in a castle, or a government facility, more than likely a castle. Impostors. And after a war, and someone was particularly looking for wherever this information came from, he found the information, he took the information, and then it showed up in a bookstore somewhere where a guy ended up stumbling across it, him, and asking the guy if he could take that book to look at it, but he was supposedly sworn that he couldn't copy the book. So him and a friend took the book and basically summarized the things that he had read in the book. Now, this was supposedly the first edition of this finding, if you would, but if you were to look for this book, you will see many editions and many offshoots of the same name. This book that I'm looking at right now, again, from 1707, this reference is at 1777. This is closest to the first edition that I could find. Okay, and trust me, I was looking for it. The problem of enlightenment. Sorry, y'all. Like, I type slow as hell now. Okay, let's see if it's in here. Come on, you gotta give me something other than this shit. Okay, yeah. I had to buy this book. I'll just show you the front because even archive.org is not, or gov, or wherever the fuck this is not giving you this book, and it doesn't cost much. Okay, the Treatise of the Three Impostors and the Problem of Enlightenment. Okay, and this is the one we're reading by Abram Anderson, and it's the 1777 edition. When I started to read it, I was like, I put up a picture of Jesus, Moses, and Muhammad sitting in the bar having a conversation. That'll be the thumbnail that you see when I open it up, where I read a good portion of this off of a Kindle or Google Books or something like that. And, you know, it has some things in there that I really had to think about, like, what is this book really saying? And it's basically saying that those three narratives, those three people are basically full of shit, that it doesn't logically add up. People would like to say that if we're educated, intelligent, and all of this stuff, that we have to believe in one of these Abrahamic religions. And like I said, those stories were given in such a way that we would remember them, but we were supposed to be elevated in our understanding to find out the truth of those stories, and we haven't got there yet. Okay? Yep, exactly, the man. Exactly. At the same time, as my niece say, at the same damn time. Okay. All right. So we're gonna start reading this. It's a small book. It's got references in the back, and that's really not even a good picture to use. Let me see if we can find something. Let's see Amazon. What Amazon has. Let me bring y'all over. Oh, y'all already over. Now you see here, it's a whole different damn book over there on the side. That one's in French. Still the same damn book, but from January 1997. Okay. Like I said, there's a lot of editions out here. Um, yeah, there's a lot of editions out here. Let's see what Open Library has. Okay, Open Library, this is the actual copy of the book that I'm reading from. That's the actual book that I'm reading from. Okay. Here you see it has 3 editions. Okay. 1997, Roman and Littlefield. That's the same 3 damn books. Shut the hell up. Okay, that's the same book. But this is the book that we're reading from. Let me look at a free online library, see what they got over here. Okay. Is this might be where I found the story. Okay. Let's read this real quick. Okay. No, I want to read this real quick. So here, who is this by? Kelly, Christopher Kelly. Christopher Kelly says that about Anderson in the book, he says, the treatise of the three impostors and the problem of enlightenment, Lanham, Maryland, Roman and Littlefield, 1997, blah, blah, blah. It says the notorious treatise of the three impostors is so shrouded in mystery that those who study it invariably compare their endeavors to detective work. The mysteries investigated by these scholarly sleuths. Okay, so he critiquing us. He probably got one of them 3 Abrahamic religions on his belt, but anyway. Sleuths include the identity of the author of the treatise, issues involving its dissemination, and even questions about the existence of some editions cited by contemporaries. This volume contains a new accurate translation of one version of the treatise along with related works which were published together in 1776 edition. It also contains 3 essays by Abraham Anderson discussing these works in relation to the problem of enlightenment. The treatise possibly existed in manuscript by 1700 and over the next century was frequently copied and published several times. The identity of its original author remains a subject of dispute, and whatever this author intended, the treatise was put to different uses by various possessors. Its radical version of the imposture account of religion, and Christianity in particular, gained favor among the anti-religious faction of Enlightenment. The treatise is also significant because its extensive use of quotations from Spinoza, as well as Hobbes and other writers, and in one incarnation, it became the first public translation of Spinoza into French. In sum, it played a crucial role in the dissemination of early modern philosophy. The use of the 1777 edition for a translation of a work written near 1700 and published as early as 1719 is justified by the set of puzzles discussed by Anderson in the accompanying commentary. The first puzzle is why the treatise would be published along with an essay denying that any such work as the treatise exists. This mystery is compounded by the immediately following response, asserting that the treatise not only exists, but that it was written around 1230, a startling claim about the work that both plagiarizes Hobbes and Spinoza and refers to Descartes by name, or Descartes by name. A final note um, tops this by revealing that anachronism, and suggests that the treatise itself is a transparent forgery written in response to an essay that had denied its existence. Readers in the 1777 edition find themselves immersed in a literary conundrum worthy of Borges and Calvino, whoever they are. I'm just a curious soul. Let's read more. Using both painstaking archival work and imaginative guesses, Anderson argues that this collection was used by a group of Enlightenment partisans as part of a two-pronged attack on tradition, direct assault on religion, and subtle satire against alternative forms of orthodoxy. The target of the second attack is revealed by the essay denying the existence of the treatise, which was written by Bernard de la Monnoye, a representative of the so-called libertines, erudites who, influenced by both Machiavellian and ancient philosophy, regarded religious imposture as a necessary support for public morality. Anderson shows how the Enlightenment partisans discredit these followers of ancient philosophy by accusing them of timidity, hypocrisy, and optimistic subservience to a repressive regime. The libertines are vulnerable because they want to hide the truth about religion from public view, but cannot resist the titillating revelation to an ever-widening group of initiates. Even while denying that a scandalous book exists, Le Monet, or Monod, I'll just say Monet, provides a precise account of what it would say if it did. Such a form of esotericism undermines itself. The partisans of radical enlightenment make a public disclosure of the scandalous truth and the libertines' ineffective concealment of it. In a final twist, however, Anderson argues that they self-consciously construct and revealed an imposture of their own. The modern proponents of clarity and enlightenment realize that their enterprise cannot be accomplished by disclosure alone. They must engage in a propaganda campaign to promote a public prejudice in favor of undermining prejudice. Anderson sees this use of the treatise as revealing a tension between the implicit premises of enlightenment and its actual preconditions. This intriguing volume does have some flaws. In an interpretation directed to non-specialists, one would expect more primarily preliminary guidance about the background of the treatise and those involved in its dissemination. Although Anderson's fascinating essays should interest students of early modern philosophy in general, they sometimes presume prior knowledge of the scholarly disputes about this mysterious work. Christopher Kelly, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. So he has some things to say, and what he says is what he says, and it may be true. But what I found interesting was it's based on, as you're reading it, how does it sit with your logic? Okay. You know, my stepdaughter and I had a conversation last night, and it was like she asked me one time, "You believe in God?" And yeah, that was a long conversation. And some things like up on these social medias, how the brothers be doing when they be quote unquote debating each other. Um, some of that stuff happened. I was like, I'm glad they didn't prepare me for this shit. But in there, when I talk about common sense, I had to ask her at one point, because we're not going to have this long ass jumping around about this, that, and the other as far as what you believe or what you think and this, that, and the other. It was like, have you ever seen a woman pop out of a man's side? They're like, no, da 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 da, and just kept going, and it didn't really register for, really didn't register. And I said, but you've heard the story that says, or the statement that says, if you have faith, keep it to yourself. No, not really. Okay, we can't have this conversation. But if you have faith, keep it to yourself because it ain't for the public. Um, but in terms of common sense, what did it mean by you saw a woman pop out of a man's side? He came from a man's side. Okay. And this is where I took it back to scholarly stuff, because we're talking about, in my opinion, Dura matter, arachnoid matter, and pia matter being something that's in your body, as opposed to the story that they tell you about the so-called three women that were three females and Adam that were in the garden. And some people say it ain't three females. Well, you got the woman, you got Lilith, and you got Eve. Eve could not be rejected. She's the one that popped out of his side. But that's more aligned with which one is it? I can't remember which one's on the outside. It's either arachnoid matter or no, it's either dura matter or pia matter. And that's what's connected to your bone, because immediately, not Jesus, they say that homeboy, Adam says, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. And that's where it sits. It sits in your body. So it goes back to science and scholarly stuff, those disciplines, as opposed to opinion and religion. So when I say common sense, I've never seen a woman pop out of a man's side. So why do I believe that this is truth? Okay. And to me, regardless of what Christopher Kelly says about his take on it from his knowledge, he still could have gleanings that want to support any one of the religions. Give you one other example. When we talk about, I think it's Eve. I think it's Eve. Of course, you got Lilith in there. Like I told my stepdaughter, I said they turned Lilith into a screaming banshee who kills babies. I said, but in Christianity, and again, this guy is critiquing Christianity, like the dude said, especially Christianity. Um, in the Christian narrative, it's Sunday. In the Christian narrative, they'll tell you, and Adam knew his wife, and God did this, and blah blah blah, and they ate, and all the stuff that they tell you in the Judeo-Christian Bible. But then it's not until you start to go over and look at Islam that you find out that when it says that he took that God took Adam, put him to sleep and created a woman and then brought him back to her, or however that's stated, that in that little window of time, that has something to do with her being trained over in Islam in the Middle Eastern countries. But we don't get that stuff. Okay. And then the other part of this, like we read in the 1776 project, okay, read in the 1776 project, oh shit, I forgot what I was gonna say looking at the screen. Um shit. Forgot what I was gonna say right there. But it's a matter of looking at a lot of different things to understand the history, rather than just one particular thing and fighting tooth and nail for that one particular thing, to mean that you either gotta believe it or not believe it. So again, I know I'm long-winded here, but going back to what I told my stepdaughter last night, I said, um, it's more so being an omniist. I said, what is, and she didn't know what that was. So we looked up the definition, and here is where it comes that there's truth in all things. But we're not writing this down saying you have to believe this with fire and brimstone and 21 virgins and, all this shit that religious tenets tell you have to do. It's about common sense. But then there's a problem with it, because just like you have different factions of religion that came up to oppose different other factions of religion, when it comes to enlightenment, you have the same thing. When it comes to science, you have the same thing. So Don't suspend your damn common sense just because this dude said what he said about this book. Look in there and see what's in there, because there were some things that he said in there that I can't deny. Like, yeah, that sounds pretty much right. Okay. Um, and it's not like it's going to change anything because this was 1770 something and we're in 2000. But we're going to read the book. Okay. Yeah, the Adam stuff. Okay. So we did not get far yesterday because my company came over. So we're going to start back at the beginning. Okay. The Treatise of the Three Impostors, Chapter 1. Um, and he says, of God. If you want to hear the precursor to this, when I open up the one with the three guys sitting in the bar, that's when you'll hear some of the prelude to this book. Okay. But I'm not going to do that today. We're just going to go into the reading. So it says, although it matters to all men to know the truth, there are nevertheless very few who enjoy this advantage. Some are incapable of searching it out by themselves, and others do not want to give themselves the trouble. One should therefore not be astonished that the world is filled with vain and ridiculous opinions. Nothing is better able to give them currency than ignorance. It is the only source of the false ideas which men have of the divinity, the soul, spirits, and of almost all the other objects which compose religion. Custom has prevailed. Many content themselves with the prejudices of birth and rely on the most essential things of interested persons who make it a law to themselves stubbornly to uphold received opinions, and who dare not destroy them for fear of destroying themselves. 2. What renders the evil without remedy is that after having established the false ideas men have of God, they omit nothing to engage the people to believe them without permitting it to examine them. On the contrary, they give it an aversion for philosophers or the truly learned, for fear that the reason which they teach should make it known the errors in which it has sunk. Partisans of these absurdities have succeeded so well that it is dangerous to combat them. It matters too much to these impostors that the people be ignorant, to suffer that it be disabused. Thus one of the constrained Thus one is constrained to disguise the truth, or to sacrifice oneself to the rage of the falsely learned, or to base and interested souls. Okay. Yesterday, this is where I stuck in the beginning of the poem that you see in my intro, where I say we are a people of we say we are a people of this sort or that, when in fact we're a nation of praisers from way back. Yet we rationalize and disguise and otherwise deny that we have marginalized the lies and compromised the root, only to satisfy what today we see as being acceptable to do. But what would we have been back then, and do we now begin again to befriend the nature within? Okay, so that's my intro, and this is, I just stumbled across this book now, but this book, that poem came over 15 years ago, but it's still talking about the same thing, that we've marginalized the truth. Okay, that's just something that's acceptable for us. You know, there's some things that has happened, and it was recognized in me then, and now I'm looking at that they were talking about it before. So I'm supposed to deny my lying eyes. Okay. Anyway, let's go to section 3. If the people could understand into what an abyss ignorance throws it, it would soon shake off the yoke of its unworthy leaders. For it is impossible to let reason act without it discovering the truth. These impostors have sensed this so well that to prevent the good effects which it would infallibly produce, they have had the idea of painting it to us as a monster which is not capable of inspiring any good sentiment. And although they blame in a general way those who are unreasonable, they would nevertheless be much annoyed if the truth were listened to. Thus, and I appreciate y'all for being here. Thus, Thus, one sees these sworn enemies to good sense falling into continual contradictions, and it is difficult to know what they claim. If it is true that right reason is the only light which man should follow, and if the people is not as incapable of reasoning as they seek to persuade it, it is necessary that those who seek to instruct it apply themselves to rectifying its false reasonings and to destroying its prejudices. Then will we see its eyes gradually open and its mind convincing itself of this truth, that God is not at all what it ordinarily imagines. Section 4. To accomplish this, there is need neither for high speculation nor to penetrate far into the secrets of nature. One needs only a little good sense to judge that God is neither angry nor jealous, that justice and mercy are false titles which are attributed to him, and that what the prophet and apostles have said of him teaches us neither his nature nor his essence. In fact, to speak without paint and to say the thing is as it is, one must not agree that those doctors were neither more able nor better instructed than the rest of men. That far from it. What they said on the subject of God is so gross that one must be altogether mad to believe it. Although, and that was a question, I didn't state it correctly. It says, although the thing is evident enough in itself, we shall make it even more sensible by examining this question. If it is any likelihood that the prophets and apostles were otherwise formed than man, like jumping out the river folks and shit. 6 or 5. Everyone agrees that with respect to birth and the ordinary functions of life, they are nothing. They had nothing to disguise them from the rest of men. They were engendered by men. They were born of women, and they conserved their lives in the same fashion as we. As for the mind, some would have it that God animated that of the prophets far more than of other men, that he communicated himself to them in quite a particular fashion. This is believed with as good faith as if the thing were proved, and without considering that all men resemble each other and that they all have the same origin. It is claimed that these men were of an extraordinary temper and chosen by the divinity to announce his oracles. Now, besides the fact that they had neither more wit than the vulgar nor more perfect understanding, what does one see in their writings which obliges us to adopt so high an opinion of them? The greater part of the things they have said, that I'm sorry, they put a line in here, so I didn't know how I was going. The greater part of the things that they have said is so obscure that one understands none of it, and in such poor order that it is easy to perceive that they did not understand themselves, and that they were but ignorant scoundrels. What gave occasion to the opinion that has been conceived of them was their hardihood in boasting that they got immediately from God whatever they announced to the people, a belief both absurd and ridiculous, since they admit themselves that God spoke to them only in dreams. There is nothing more natural to man than dreams. In consequence, a man must be quite impudent, quite vain, and quite mad to say that God speaks to him by this means, or that he puts his faith in it, that he who puts his faith in it must be very credulous and very mad to take dreams for divine oracles. Let us suppose for a moment that God made himself understood by someone, by dreams, by visions, and by such means as one must wish to imagine. Nobody is obligated to believe on the word of man No one is obligated to believe on his word a man subject to error, or even to lying and imposture. Thus we see that under the ancient law, they do not have anywhere close to as much esteem for the prophets as men do today. When they were tired of their babble, which often tended only to soil revolt and to turn the people away from the obedience due to sovereigns, they silenced them by diverse tortures. Jesus Christ himself did not escape the just punishment which he merited. He had not, like Moses, an army at his back to defend his opinions. Add to this that the prophets were so accustomed to contradicting each other that out of 400, not one true could be found. What is more, mm, what is more is, mm, what is more, it is certain that the aim of these prophecies, as much as of the laws of most of the most celebrated legislators, was to eternalize their memory by making the people believe that they conferred with God. The most subtle politicians have always followed this usage, although this ruse has not always succeeded for those who did not, like Moses, have a means of assuring their safety. 6. Assuming this. Now, y'all good? Let me go back to the computer for a second. Okay. Y'all still here? Okay, cool. 6. Assuming this, let us examine the idea. Assuming this, let us examine a little the idea which the prophets had of God. If they are not, if we are not to believe them, God is a purely corporal being. Mackay, and y'all check this out for those of you who know y'all shit. God is a purely corporal being. Mackay sees him seated, Daniel clothed in white and in the form of an old man. Ezekiel sees him as a fire. So much for the Old Testament. As for the New, the disciples of Jesus Christ imagine they see him in the form of a dove, the apostles as tongues of fire, and finally St. Paul as a light which dazzled and blinded him or blinds him. Then, as to the contradiction between their opinions, 10 Samuel believed that God never repented for what he had resolved to do on the what he had resolved to do. On the contrary, Jeremiah B tells us that God repents of the counsels he has taken. Joel C teaches us that he repents only of the evil he has done to men. Jeremiah says that he does not repent it. And such as it is desired, we should have without considering that those. I'm sorry, I'm struggling right here. Let me get this. Such are the false and contradictory ideas which those pretenders to inspiration give us of God, and such as it is desired we should have, without considering that these ideas represent the divinity to us as a sensible being, material and subject to all the human passions. Nevertheless, they come along afterwards and tell us that God has nothing in common with matter, and that he is a being incomprehensible to us. I should very much like to know how all that can be made to agree. If it is just to believe such visible and unreasonable contradictions, and if finally one should rely on the testimony of men gross enough to imagine, despite the sermons of Moses, that a calf was their God. But without pausing over the dreamings of a people raised in servitude and in absurdity, let us agree that ignorance has produced the belief that all the impostures and errors which reign among us at the present day. I hope I said that right. Let me say that again. But without pausing over the dreamings of a people raised in servitude and in absurdity, let us agree that ignorance has produced the belief in all the impostures and errors which reign among us at the present day. Okay. Chapter 2. bio or call out of the reasons which have led men to imagine an invisible being, which is commonly called God. It's crazy. I had just had this conversation with my stepdaughter. Section 1. Those who are ignorant of physical causes have a natural fear, which proceeds from uneasiness and from the doubt they are in, if there exists a being or a power which has the capacity to harm them or to preserve them. Thence, the penchant which they have to feign invisible causes, which are only the phantoms of their imagination, which they invoke in adversity and which they praise in prosperity. They make themselves gods out of these in the end, and this chimerical fear of invisible powers is the source of the religions which each forms after his own fashion. Those of whom it mattered, those to whom it mattered, that the people he contained and arrested by such dreamings have fostered the seed of religion, have made a law of it, and have finally reduced the people by the terrors of the future to obeying blindly. Section 2. The source of the gods being found, men have believed that they resembled themselves and that like them they did all things for some end. Thus, they say and believe unanimously that God has done nothing but for man, and reciprocally that man is made for God alone. This prejudice in general, and when one reflects on the influence which it must necessarily have in the morals and opinions of men, one sees clearly that it is thence that they have found occasion to form the false ideas of good and evil, of merit and of demerit, of praise and of shame, of order and of confusion, of beauty and of deformity, and of other similar things. 3. Everyone should agree that all men are in profound ignorance at birth, and that the only thing which is natural to them is to seek what is useful and profitable to them. Thence it comes, one degree, that they think that it is enough in order to be free to feel within oneself that one can will and wish without troubling oneself in the least about the causes which dispose us to will and to wish, because one does not know them. Degree 2, or second degree, or that's what they got, a 2 and a degree mark. So I didn't see that before. I don't remember that part. But anyway, let's continue. Since men do nothing but for the sake of an end which they prefer to every other, their only aim is to know the final causes of their actions, and they imagine that after they have no more subject for doubt, and since they find in themselves and outside themselves several means of arriving at what they propose to themselves, seeing that they have, for example, eyes for seeing, ears for hearing, a light or a sun to light them, etc., they have concluded that there is nothing in nature which is not made for them, and which they cannot enjoy and use as they wish. But since they know that it was not they who have made all these things, they thought they were justified in imagining a supreme being, the author of it all. In a word, they thought that everything that exists was the work of one or several deities. On the other hand, the nature of the gods, which men have acknowledged being unknown to them, they judged of them by themselves, imagining that they were susceptible of the same passions as they. And since the inclination of men are different, each rendered to his divinity a cult according to his humor, with the view of attracting his blessing and of thereby making the whole of nature serve his own desires. 4. It is in this manner that prejudice transformed itself into superstition. It rooted itself so thoroughly that the crudest people believed themselves capable of penetrating into final causes as if they had an entire knowledge of them. Thus, instead of showing that nature does nothing in vain, thus instead of showing that nature does nothing in vain, they believe that God and nature thought after the fashion of men. Experience having made known that an infinite number of calamities trouble the sweetness of life, like storms, earthquake, diseases, hunger, thirst, etc. They attribute all these evils to celestial anger. They believe the divinity irritated against the offenses of men who have not been able to free their brains from such a chimera, nor disabuse themselves of these prejudices by the daily examples which prove to them that goods and evils have in all times been common to the good and the wicked. This error was was due to the fact that it was easier for them to retain in their natural ignorance than to abolish a prejudice perceived for so many centuries and to establish something probable. 5. This prejudice led them to another, which is to believe that the judgments of God were incomprehensible, and that for this reason the knowledge of the truth was beyond the strength of the human mind. An honor which we would still be in if mathematics, physics, and some other sciences had not destroyed it. 6. There is no need for long speeches to show that nature never proposed any end to itself and that all final causes are but human fictions. It suffices to prove that the doctrine removes from God the perfections that are attributed to him. That is what we are going to show. If God acts for an end, whether for himself or for another, he desires what he does not have, and one will have to agree that there is a time at which God, not having the object for which he acts, he wished to have it, which is to make an indigent God, but not to admit any of what can support the reasoning of those who hold the contrary opinion. Let me read that sentence again. But not to omit any of what can support the reasoning of those who hold the contrary opinion, like us suppose, for example, that a stone which breaks off a building falls on a person and kills him. It must be, say our ignorant ones, that this stone fell by design to kill this person. But this can only have happened because God willed it. If one replies to them that it was the wind that caused this to fall at the time that the poor unhappy fellow was passing, they will ask you in the first place, why was he passing precisely at that moment that the wind disturbed the stone? Answer them that he was going to dine with one of his friends who had invited him. They will wish to know why his friend had rather invited him at the time than at another. They will thus put you in they will thus put you and an infinity of bizarre questions to rise from cause to cause, and to make you admit that the will of God alone, which is the refuge of the ignorance, is the first cause of the fall of this stone. In the same way, when they see the structure of the human body, they fall into admiration, and because they do not know the causes of the effects which seems to them so marvelous, they conclude that it is a supernatural effect in which the causes that are known to us can have no part. Thus it comes that he who wants to examine at the bottom of the works of creation and to penetrate like a true scientist into the natural causes without enslaving himself to the prejudices formed by ignorance, pass for an infidel, or is soon decried by the malice of those whom the vulgar recognize as the interpreters of nature and of the gods. These mercenary souls know very well that the ignorance which holds the people in wonderment is what gives them subsistence and conserves their credit. 7. Men, having thus imbued themselves with the ridiculous opinion that everything they see is made for them, have made it a point of religion to refer everything to themselves and to judge the worth of things by the profit which they draw from it. It is upon this that they have founded notions which serve them to explain the nature of things, to judge of the good and evil, of order and of disorder, of heat and of cold, of beauty and of ugliness, etc., which at the bottom are not at all what they imagine. Able thus to form their ideas, they flatter themselves that they are free. They believe themselves entitled to decide the praise and blame of the good, or of good and evil. Praise and blame of good and evil. They have called good what turns to their profit and what regards to the cult of gods, and evil, on the contrary, they agree neither with the one nor with the other. And because, I'm sorry, I'm struggling here because they got this symbol and these lines in here at points. Anyway, because the ignorant are not capable of judging anything and have no idea of things but by the help of the imagination which they take for the judgment, they tell us that nothing is known about nature and picture themselves a particular order in the world. In some, they believe things well or badly ordered, depending on whether they find it easy or difficult to imagine them when sense presents them to them. And since one gladly stops with what least fatigues the brain, they persuade themselves that they are justified in preferring order to confusion, as if order were anything else than a pure effect of the imagination of men. Thus, to say that God has made everything in order is to claim that it is on behalf of the human imagination that he has created the world in a manner the most easy to be conceived by it, or what at bottom is the same thing, that we know with certainty the relations and the ends of all that exists, an assertion too absurd to merit being seriously refuted. 8. What's up, Tenwell? 8. As for the other notions, they are pure effects of the same imagination, which have nothing real, and which are but different affections and modes of which this faculty is susceptible. When, for example, the movements of when, for example, the movements which objects impress on the nerves through the medium of the eyes are agreeable to the senses, they say that these objects are beautiful. Odors are good or bad, taste sweet or bitter. What is touched hard or soft, sounds rude or agreeable, according as the odors, the taste, and the sound strike and penetrate the senses. It is in this accordance with these ideas that they are people who believe that God is pleased with melody, while others have believed that the celestial movements are a harmonious concert, which clearly shows that everyone persuades himself that things are just as he fancies them, and that the world is purely imaginary. It is therefore not astonishing that there are hardly two men with the same opinion, or that there are even some who glory in doubting of everything. For although men have the same body and they all resemble each other in many regards, they nevertheless differ to many others. Thence it comes that what seems good to one becomes bad for another, that what pleases the one displeases the other, from which it is easy to conclude that sentiments differ only because of the organization and of the diversity of coexistences, that reasoning has little part in this. Let me read that again, because I want to make sure I'm understanding where he's at right here. From which it is easy to conclude that sentiments differ only because of the organization and of the diversity of coexistences, that reasoning has little part in this, and that finally the notions of the things of the world are but a pure effect of the imagination alone. Number 10. It is therefore evident that all the reasonings it is therefore evident that all the reasons which the common run of men are accustomed to use when they try to explain nature are only fashions of imagining, which are utterly incapable of doing what they claim. They claim, mm-mm, they claim. They give names to these ideas as if they existed everywhere but in a prejudiced brain. They also, they should be called not beings but pure chimeras or chimeras. Chimeras. Okay. As for That's the Spanish version. Okay. As for the arguments founded on these notions, there is nothing easier than refuting them. For example, if it were true, they tell us that the universe was a flowing forth and a necessary consequence of the divine nature, which would whence would come those imperfections and the defects which we observe in it. Okay, I hate the way that he writes questions. Let me do that again. If it were true, they tell us, that the universe were flowing forth and a necessary consequence of the divine nature, whence would come those imperfections and the defects which we observe in it? This objection is refuted with no trouble at all. One cannot judge of the perfection and of the imperfection of a being, except insofar as one knows the essence of its nature, and it is to deceive oneself strangely to believe that a thing is more or less perfect according as it pleases or displeases, and it is useful or harmful to human nature. To shut the mouth of those who ask why God has not created all men good and happy, it suffices to say that all are necessarily what it is, and that in nature there is nothing imperfect, since all flows from the necessity of things. 10. Assuming this, if someone asks what God is, damn, I should have read this part. Anyway, assuming this, if someone asks what God is, I respond that this word represents to us the universal being in which, to speak like Saint Paul, we have life, movement, and being. This notion has nothing which is unworthy of God. For if all is God, all flows necessarily from his essence, and it is absolutely necessary that he be such as what he contains, since it is incomprehensible that beings all of which are material be maintained and contained in a being which is not so. This opinion is not new. Tertullian, one of the most unlearned men whom Christians have had, pronounced against Apelles, Apelles, that what is not body is nothing, and against Praxis, that every substance is a body. This doctrine, however, was not condemned in the first ecumenial or nor general council. 11. So you can tell he's got a background in something. Y'all good over here? What's going on? You have a PDF of it. It's 96 pages. The one you're. Wait. You say you have a PDF of it. Is it 96 pages? The one you have, sister? The book that I have is, I think the last page is 165. Okay. All right. There's some references here down on the bottom. Because, yeah, there's some references on the bottom. But let me continue. 11. These ideas are clear, simple, and the only ones that a good mind can form of God. However, there are few people who content themselves with such simplicity. The people crude and accustomed to the flatteries of the senses demands a God which resembles the king of the earth. Pomp, that great splendor which surrounds them dazzles it so much that to take from it the idea of a God more or less similar to these kings is to take from it the hope of going after death to increase the number of celestial courtiers, to enjoy with them the same pleasures that one tastes at the court of kings. It is to deprive man of the only consolation which prevents him from despairing in the miseries of life. They say that we need a just and vengeful God who punishes and rewards. They want a God susceptible to all of the human passions. They give him feet, hands, ears, eyes, and yet they do not want to allow that God. They do not want to allow that a God constituted in this way has nothing material about him. They say that man is his masterpiece and even his image, but they do not want to allow that the copy resembles the original. In short, the God of the people of today is subject to many more forms of the rabbis who decided according to their fancy what should be approved or rejected as they found it in conformity or opposed to the law of Moses. A. Such is the malice and the stupidity of men. They pass their lives in quibbling and persist in respecting a book in which there is no more order than the Alcoran of, and they spell it Alcoran. Okay, persist in respecting a book in which there is no more order than in the Alcoran of Muhammad, a book, I say, which no one understands. It is so obscure and ill-conceived, a book which serves only to foment divisions. The Jews and Christians prefer consulting this book of spells, listening to the natural law. The Jews and Christians prefer consulting this book of spells to listening to the natural law which God, that is to say nature, insofar as it is the principle of all things, has written in the heart of men. All other laws are but human fictions and pure illusions giving birth but by demons and or evil spirits, which never existed but in the idea, but by the politics of princes and priests. Let me read that again. All other laws are but human fictions and pure illusions giving birth, not by demons and evil spirits, which never existed but an idea, but by the politics of princes and of priests. The first wanted thereby to give more weight to their authority, and the latter have wanted to enrich themselves by the retelling, as in not telling, but tailing, like when you buy something, retelling, okay, of an infinity of chimeras which they sell dear to the ignorant. All the other laws which have succeeded of that of Moses, I mean the laws of the Christians, are supported by nothing but the Bible, the the original of which is nowhere to be found, which contains supernatural and impossible things, which speaks of rewards and punishments for good and bad actions, but which are only for the afterlife, for fear that the trick be discovered, none ever having returned from there. Thus, the people, always floating between hope and fear, is retained in its duty by the opinion it has that God has made men only in order to render them eternally happy or unhappy. Thus, this is what has given rise to an infinity of religions. And that was chapter 2. Okay. This is chapter 3. Call out. What what this word religion signifies, how and why such a large number of them have introduced themselves into the world. The first paragraph of chapter 3. Before the word religion had introduced itself into the world, one was obliged only to follow natural law, that is to say, to conform oneself to right reason. This instinct alone was the bond to which men were attached, and this bond, as simple as it is, united them so well that divisions were rare. But as soon as fear had made them suspect that there are gods and invisible powers, they raised altars to these imaginary beings, and shaking off the yoke of nature and of reason, they bound themselves by vain ceremonies and by a superstitious cult of the vain phantoms of the imagination, or phantoms of the imagination. It is from there derives the word religion, which makes so much noise in the world. Men having admitted invisible powers which have full control over them, they worship them to propagate them, and moreover, they imagine that nature was a being subordinated to these powers. From then on, they imagine it as a dead mask, or as a slave, which acted only following the order of these powers. I'm sorry, I thought about something right there. Because it's like if you just switch out what they were thinking about nature and put yourself in there, you became a dead mass that are subjugated. It's the same shit. Okay, but let me continue. Okay. Um, From then on, they imagined it as a dead mass or as a slave which acted only following the order of these powers. As soon as this false idea had struck their mind, they no longer had anything but contempt for nature and respect only for those pretended beings which they named after their gods. Thence came the ignorance in which so many people are plunged, an ignorance out of which the truly learned could have drawn them, however deep its abyss, if their zeal were not thwarted by those who led these blind men and who live only by the grace of their impostures. But though there is little hope of succeeding in this enterprise, one must not abandon the party of truth, were it only out of the considerations of those who preserve themselves from the symptoms of this evil. It is necessary that a generous soul say things as they are. The truth of whatever nature it may be can never harm, whereas error, the truth of whatever nature it may be can never harm, whereas error, however innocent and even useful it may appear, must necessarily, in the long run, have most disastrous effects. In the long run, I would say the most disastrous effects. Okay. 2. The fear which made the gods also made religion. And ever since men have got it into their heads that there were invisible angels which were the cause of their good or bad fortune, they have renounced good sense and reason, and they have taken their chimeras for so many divinities which were in charge of their conduct. Having thus forged themselves gods, they wanted to know what their nature was, and imagining that they ought to be of the same substance as the soul, which they believe resembles the phantoms which appear in the mirror or during sleep. They believe that their gods were real substances, but they're tenuous or but so tenuous and so subtle that to disguise them from bodies they named them spirits, although these bodies and these spirits are in effect but the same thing, and different only as more from less, since to be spirit or incorporeal is something incomprehensible. The reason is that every spirit has a shape which is proper to it, or a which is proper to it, and is enclosed in some space, that is to say, it has its limits, and in consequence it is a body, however subtle one supposes it. Number 3, the ignorant, that is to say, the greater part of men, having fixed in this way the nature of the substance of their gods, tried also to penetrate by what means these invisible angels produce their effects. But being unable to achieve this because of their ignorance, they believed in their conjectures, judging blindly of the future by the past, as if one could reasonably conclude from the fact that a thing happened once in such and such a manner that it will happen, or it should always happen in the same manner. Above all, when the circumstances and all causes which necessarily influence events of human action and which determine their nature and actuality are different. Thus they are envisaged, envisage the past and augured well or ill from it for the future, according to the same enterprise had formerly succeeded well or badly. It is thus that Phormio, 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 having defeated the Lacedaemonians at the battle of Nampactus, the Athenians, after his death, elected another general of the same name. Hannibal, having succumbed under the arms of Scipio Africanus, because of this good success of the Romans, sent into the same province another Scipio against Caesar, which succeeded neither from the Athenians nor from the Romans. Thus several nations, after 2 or 3 experiences, have attached to places, to objects, and to names their good or bad fortunes. Others have used certain words which they call enchantments, and have believed them so efficacious that they imagined that by their but that by their means they made trees speak, and that they made a man or a god from a piece of bread, and metamorphosized all that appeared before them. 4. The empire of invisible powers being established in this way, men at first revered them only as their sovereigns, that is to say, by marks of submission, of respect, such as our presents, prayers, etc. I say at first, for nature does not teach us bodily or bloody sacrifice in this affair. Let me say that again. I say at first, for nature does not teach us to use bloody sacrifices in this affair. They were only instituted for the subsistence of the sacrificer and ministers destined for the service of those imaginary gods. 5. This germ of religion, hope and fear, second by the different passions and opinions of men, produced that great number of bizarre beliefs which are the causes of so many evils and of so many revolutions which happen in the states. The honors and the great revenues which have been attached to the priesthood and to the ministries of the gods have flattered the ambition and avarices of those cunning men who have known how to profit from the stupidity of the people. The latter have fallen so thoroughly into their snares that they have insensibly made it a habit for themselves to revere the lie and to hate the truth. On page number 16, you guys. Y'all good? Y'all okay in the chat? Okay. Okay. All right. I know. Y'all had to understand I cross-reference this shit. When they say God, I'm putting other words in there, just understanding it on that base level. Or I'm putting understanding in there, a different understanding in there. But let's go. 6. The lie being established, and the ambitious taken with the sweetness of being raised above their fellows, they attempted to gain reputation by feigning to be the friends of the invisible gods that the vulgar feared. The better to succeed in this, each one painted them in his own fashion and took the liberty of multiplying them to the point that one encountered them with every step one took. 7. The formless matter of the world was called the God, chaos. In the same way, they made a god of the sky, of the earth, of the sea, of fire, and of wind, and of the planets. They did the same honor to men and to women, birds and reptiles, crocodiles and calf, the dog, the lamb, the serpent, the pig. In a word, all sorts of animals and plants were worshipped. Every river, every spring bore the name of a god. Every house had its own. Every man had his genius. In short, all was filled as much as all was filled as much above as below the earth with gods, spirits, shadows, and demons. It was still not enough to feign divinity. It was still not enough to feign divinities in every imaginable place. They would have believed they were offending time, the day, the night, concord, love, peace, victory, contention, rust, honor, virtue, fever, and health. They would, I say, have believed they were doing an outrage to such divinities which they thought always ready to fall upon the heads of men, if they had not raised to them temples and altars. Next, they had the idea of adorning one's genius, which some invoked under the name of muses, others under the name of fortune worshipped their own ignorance. Some sacrificed their debaucheries under the name of Cupid, their anger under the Furies, and their natural parts under the name of Priapus. In a word, there was nothing to which they did not give the name of a god or of a demon. 8. The founders of religion, sensing clearly that the basis of their impostures was the ignorance of the peoples, resolved to keep them in it by the adoration of images, which they feigned that gods inhabited. This made fall on their priests a rain of gold and of the benefices, which were regarded as holy things because they were destined for the use of the holy ministers, and no one had the temerity nor the audacity to pretend to them, nor even to touch them. The better to deceive the people, the priests put themselves forward as prophets, diviners, inspired persons capable of penetrating the future. They boasted of having commerce with gods, and as it is natural to want to know one's destiny, these impostors by no means neglected a circumstance so advantageous to their design. Some established themselves at Delos, Delos, others at Delphi and elsewhere, where by means of ambiguous oracles they responded to the questions that were put to them. Even the women got involved. The Romans had recourse in the great calamities of the book of the Sibyls. And if my sister on here, I'm gonna read that again. Okay, I'm start here. Some established themselves at Delos, others at Delphi and elsewhere, where by means of ambiguous oracles they responded to the questions that were put to them. Even the women got involved. The Romans had recourse in great calamities to the book of the Sibyls. Okay. The mad passed for inspired. Those who feigned that they had a familiar commerce with the dead were called necromancers. Others claimed to know the future by the flight of birds and by the entrails of beasts. In short, the eyes, hands, feet, face, and ordinary objects, everything seemed to them of a good or bad augury. So true is it that ignorance receives whatever impression one wants when one has found it the secret of taking advantage of it. Okay. Mm. Okay. Yeah, I know this is going to strike some people wrong. I must have got the short version because they haven't even talked about Moses yet. But anyway, let's go. The ambitious who we're in 9, page number 17, section 38 in the margin. But number 9 of chapter 3. The ambitious, who have always been great masters of the art of deceiving, have followed this route when they gave laws, and to oblige the people to submit itself voluntarily, they have persuaded it that they had received them from a god or a goddess. Whatever is the case with this multitude of divinities, those among whom they were adorned and who are called pagans have no general system of religion. Every republic, every state, every city, and every individual had its own rights. A thought about divinity as and thought about divinity as it fancied. But afterwards there arose legislators, trickier than the first ones, who used more studied and surer means in giving laws, cults, and ceremonies proper to nourish the fanaticism which they wanted to establish. Among a great number, Asia has been three born who distinguish themselves as much by their laws and the cults which they instituted as by the idea which they gave of the divinity and by the manner in which they set about getting this idea accepted and rendering their laws sacred. Moses, the most ancient, Jesus came after him, worked on his plan in conserving the heart of the laws. He abolished the rest. Muhammad, who appeared in the last upon the scene, took from the one and from the other religion the wherewithal to compose his own, and thereafter declared himself the enemy of both. Let us see the characters of these three legislators. Let us examine their conduct so that one can judge afterward who is better founded, who those who revered them as divine men or those who called them tricksters and impostors. 10. Of Moses. The celebrated Moses, the grandson of the great magician, by the report of Justin Martyr, had all the advantages proper to render him what he became afterwards. Excuse me, guys. Everyone knew, or everyone knows, that the Hebrews of whom he made himself the chief was a nation of shepherds, whom the Pharaoh king Osiris I received into his land in consideration of the services which he had received from one of them in a time of great famine. He gave them some lands in the east of Egypt, in a country fertile in pasturages, and by consequence proper to nourish their herds. During among almost 200 centuries, they multiplied considerably, whether because being considered as strangers, they were not obligated to serve in the armies, or because, and on account of the privileges which Osiris had accorded them, several natives of the country joined themselves to them, or finally, because some bands of Arabs came to join themselves to the character of their brothers, for they were of the same race. Whatever the case, they multiplied so astonishingly that no longer able to fit themselves. Whatever the case, they multiplied so astonishingly that no longer able to fit themselves in the land of Goshen, they spread throughout all of Egypt and gave Pharaoh a just reason to fear that they would be capable of some dangerous enterprise in case Egypt were attacked. um, I'm sorry, as Egypt was attacked, as it happened fairly often by the Ethiopians, his inveterate enemies. Mm-mm-mm. And to seek the means of weakening them and of enslaving them. That was informative because I didn't know the Egyptians and the Ethiopians were really enemies because they really didn't give a shit, but because they all get merged together right now, um, under that black African shit, Hebrew Israelite shit. I'm sorry, y'all. I got to get something to drink, clear my throat a little bit. I hope you guys are enjoying the read. And if you say anything right now, I'm not even back here in the room. So um, give me a minute. We're going to have to take a ladies' break right here. But I hope y'all are enjoying this read. I know that it might not tickle the fancy of some people who look at religion as they do. It might be even juvenile to some people who, uh, have lived around or with, these religious tenets, if you would, these religious people and denominations and, all of that stuff. But, this is something that they're saying that they were talking about in the 1700s while the company or the United States was being formed and declaring its independence. And this dude, in whatever fashion he says it, he's saying, all this shit was some bullshit. Have you looked at this logically? Have you done this with reasoning? I was talking to my daughter-in-law, not daughter-in-law, my stepdaughter last night, and shoot, where's that thought? It just slid all the way off of there. Damn, I really missed my point right there. All right. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Yeah, luckily I heard that drop in the sound. Um, Taking my phone with me is hot right now. But I appreciate I saw something down in the chat that said it's been dope. Appreciate it. Okay. Is this is the shit that's going on, but they want us to believe shit blindly. And when you go to talk to somebody, like I said, I had a conversation. It was on multiple things last night, but that conversation took a drastic turn where you know the God thing came up, and we was on there for hours hashing it out. Me trying to expose some of the things that I've learned in the time, as quickly as possible in the time that I learned it, while I'm being bombarded with questions the same way that people do up on these panels where you can't finish your thought because they're interrupting you with another question and this, that, and the other, and then saying that you're being argumentative about the way you did it. Yeah, I'm like, I'm not the same person. I'm gonna show you who I am in a minute, you know. And I was able to stay focused. I'm glad about that. I was able to stay focused in talking to her. But while the phone had went off, just for you guys, while the phone had went off, and I said I forgot my thought. My thought was about the noble arts again. Okay, it was about, if you don't turn this shit on like right now. Okay, it was about the noble arts and how each one builds on the next one. Okay, that you have to have proper grammar before you can really understand rhetoric, and in order to get out of rhetoric, you have to understand logic, but grammar is associated with every last one of them. And to make the transition from trivium to quadrivium, language to mathematics, if you would, you got to understand the correlations to be able to apply the mathematics to get to arithmetic, and understanding arithmetic, the shapes and then the frequencies and the vibrations and all of that stuff going into music, and then being able to observe the world in which you live in, meaning astronomy, not astrology, for the shapes, vibrations, musical frequencies, messages, this, that, and the other, to understand things. And when it comes to the religion, that's not what we're given. We're given some person a long ass time ago doing some shit that they wrote about in the Bible, the Quran, and some other damn book, that can't be questioned because of some invisible God. And we act like we're not being dumbed down mentally for the sake of a religion or a blind faith, if you would. My phone is hot, you guys, so I'm trying to cool it down a little bit right now because I have my it gets the temperature of hell over here, and so as not to get my bill too high, I don't turn my air conditioning on until a certain time of the day. And this happens to be that time when it's not on. And this motherfucker says it's 84 degrees in here. Okay. Um, Speaking of hot outside, let me let 70 in while I take this minor little break here. I mean, I don't want to be on here the whole day. Come on, baby. You coming in? Don't be bringing no damn balls in here. You a heifer. All right. Her and this damn ball. Come here, I'll pet you. Good to see you, girl. All right, go eat your food. I'm not throwing that damn ball. Hold on, y'all. Let me get Seven some water because, I know it's hot outside. But yeah, I mean, some people may not agree with it. And I even questioning Christopher Kelly, who was talking about, oh, he exposed himself for this, that, and the other. Well, he revealed some things that we should have been talking about a long ass time ago. Whether you're talking about the, what is it, the Republic of Letters, and here it is. The book talks about the treatise of the three impostors and the problem with enlightenment. Okay, we ain't enlightened, not yet. We fanciful. Okay, we being sensationalized, mythologized, and all this other. I ain't gonna go back to that damn study, but believing things without the factual stuff to go through it. And then when you start to talk about the damn science, like you said, that physics destroyed and something else destroyed, physics, mathematics, and something else destroyed the blind faith. You got folks that say we don't need to look at science because, like kind of like how my daughter was talking about, my stepdaughter was talking about, that that scientists don't believe in God. It's not what you imagine. Okay? But you can't tell people, hey, it's not this because I am the God and this, that, and the other. And now you got to fight with them about whose God is better, the one that you believe in or the one that they believe in, the one that you are, the one that they are. You know, it goes back to Carl Jung. And some people say Jung, some people say Young. And one of my favorite posts from him or quotes from him is, if I am I because I am I and you are you because you are you, then I am and you are. But if I am I because you are you and you are you because I am I, then I am not and you are not. Okay? We have a right to believe our own certain thing. And the problem in the way that like omniism I find to be very beneficial is because it recognizes the truth in all things. um, as far as religions and spiritual systems and all of that, it recognizes there's truth in all of them, but it doesn't purport to do harm or browbeat someone into believing and adopting tenets of that particular religion. Because what's good for the goose, they say, ain't good for the gander. And when you get to looking at shit, it's like, wait a minute. I sat in the church for the longest going, and I'm just supposed to ignore that y'all against women? That we ain't got a voice, that we can't do this, you got to be in subjection. We were called women or women wife men because we were only here to help the brothers. And it takes the research to find out that it were men and women talking about this stuff, and not just that priesthood that they're talking about, but other priesthoods or cults or governments or organizations, whatever the fuck you want to call them, nations or what, tribes, whatever, that had different stances, but they got overrun by other people, from other people who were only there to serve their own interests. And you want me to suspend my critical thinking? Like I told my nephew, no, school is about critical thinking. He mentioned critical thinking, but school is about critical thinking. Education, for the most part, well, I say it a little different, but when it comes to education, that's about people telling you what to think. Critical thinking is about knowing how to think, and that's what universities are. So that's why I won't let anybody say, fuck these universities. You can say what you want to, but it doesn't stand over here, because I know that some of us need other opportunities, accesses, and other things to be able to expand our intellectual border, our minds. We have to work this muscle, and we can't work this muscle with route memorization about things that have been told to us over and over again. Okay, this is one of the problems of our society, and this is one of the things that we have to fix when it comes to what goes on in this nation. Okay, hey, you sound like the church. It don't take all that. No, it takes that and then some. Okay. And this is the reason why some people, I'm not saying all, but some people are stuck where they are and not moving from there, because they don't want to grow the fuck up. They don't want to put down childish things. Okay? Who's in here? Carbon Crowns, peace, peace, peace. Okay? So my phone is a little cool. I shouldn't be eating in y'all face, but I just want to take a bite, because a sister ain't got to eat this morning. Okay? And don't talk about me about putting my stuff in the microwave. Okay, but I made some stew, and I got to eat the last of it before I had to freeze it. Okay. It's hot. Okay. Ooh. I know it's like 150 degrees, and I'm talking about stew, but I can't eat that fast food. I'm gonna have enough time to eat fast food in a minute. Okay. Sorry, I went to go get me something to drink too, but we almost back. I'm just taking a quick little break here. Give me just a second, family. I'll be with you. I could left the headset in the room, but who knows when the thought gonna come up. So, like I said, some people may not agree with this reading. Some people may think that it's juvenile. They already know that. But these are things that should have been discussed a long ass time ago. Because if we would have studied the philosophers, we wouldn't be thinking about religion like we do. We would be knowing where a lot of this stuff came from, and not this spooky ass God in the sky. But men that got together, so-called inspired by putting an organization together. Okay. Almost back to the room, y'all. Give me a minute. Oh, iced tea is good. All right, where's the book? All right. Yeah, I stumbled across that when I was in school. Love the quote. I kept it on something for a long time, but it made sense. It confirmed, validated, and allowed me to make distinctions that otherwise were not being allowed to be made. To be able to have a quick sheet for the, what you mean I'm not, blah, 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 and why we might think that way. Yeah, he's a good one. Okay, so of Moses, I know this is going to rub some people the wrong way, but Muhammad's going to get his turn too. Okay, and so did Jesus. So anyway, let's continue. Where are we at? Let's go back a little bit. Let's go back a little bit. Let's go. It's one long ass sentence too. All right. Backtracking to the beginning of 10 of Moses. The celebrated Moses of the grandson of the great magician, by the report of Justin Martyr, had all the advantages proper to render him what he became afterwards. Everyone knows that the Hebrews, of whom he made himself the chief, was a nation of shepherds, whom the Pharaoh king Osiris I received into his land in consideration for the services which he had received by one of them at the time of famine. They gave them some land in the east of Egypt, in a country fertile in pasturages, and by consequence proper to nourish their herds. During almost 2 centuries, they multiplied considerably, whether because they were considered a stranger, or, I'm sorry, during almost 2 centuries, they multiplied considerably, whether because being considered as strangers, they were not obliged to serve in the armies, or because on account of the privileges which Osiris had accorded them, several natives of the country joined themselves to them, or finally, because some bands of Arabs came to join themselves to the character of their brothers, for they were of the same race. Whatever the case, they multiplied so astonishingly that no longer able to fit themselves in the land of Goshen, they spread through all of Egypt and gave Pharaoh a just reason to fear that they would be capable of dangerous enterprises in case Egypt were attacked, as happened at a time fairly often by the Egyptians, his inveterate enemies. Thus a reason of state obliged this prince to take away their privileges and to seek the means of weakening them and of enslaving them. Pharaoh Orus, Orus, surnamed Busiris, Busirus, on account of his cruelty, who succeeded Memnon, followed his plan with regard to the Hebrews, and wishing to eternalize his memory by the erection of the pyramids and by building the city of Thebes, he condemned the Hebrews to make the bricks, for the forming of which the soils of their country was very poor. It is during this bondage that the celebrated Moses was born, the same year that the king ordered that all the male children of the Hebrews should be thrown into the Nile, seeing that there were no sure means to make the horde of strangers perish. Thus Moses was exposed to perish by water. And it said exposed. I didn't mess that up, y'all. Thus Moses was exposed to perish by water in a basket endued with bitumen, which his mother placed in the rushes of the banks of the river. Chance willed it that Thermudis, daughter of Pharaoh Orus, came for a walk thereabouts, and that having heard the cries of this child, that compassion so natural to her sex inspired her with the desire to save it. Oris being dead, Thermutis, Termutis, succeeded him, and Moses having been presented to her, she had she had given she had him given an education. Sorry, this is I'm kind of not wanting to read this because it's like everybody know the story of Moses. So, but let me try that again. Okay, right there. Uh, um, Oris being dead, the mutus succeeded him, and Moses, having been presented to her, she had him given an education, such as could be given to a son of a queen of a nation, then the most learned and the most polite in the universe. In a word, in saying that he was raised in all the sciences of the Egyptians, it is to say all, and it is to present Moses to us as the greatest politician, the most learned naturalist, and the most famous magician of his time. Besides the fact that it is very apparent that he was admitted into the order of the priests, who were in Egypt with the Druids were in I'm sorry, let me try that again. Besides the fact that it is very apparent that he was admitted into the order of the priests who were in Egypt, what the Druids were in Gaul. Thus, or those, I don't know why I'm struggling. We ain't gonna make it through all of this because I'm struggling too much, you guys. Or I'm starting to struggle. Um, those who do not know what the government of Egypt was at the time will perhaps not be vexed to learn that its famous dynasties have come to an end, and that the whole country, depending on a single sovereign, it is divided at a time into several countries which did not have too great an extent. The governors of these countries were called monarchs, and these governors were ordinarily of the powerful order of the priests who possessed almost a third of Egypt. The king appointed the holders of these monarchs, and if one believe the authors who have written about Moses, in comparing what they have said with what Moses himself has written on the matter, one will conclude that he was monarch of the country of Goshen, and that he owed his elevation to the Mudas, that to whom he also owed his life. Such a one was Moses in Egypt, where he had all the time and the means of studying the mores of the Egyptian and those of his own nation, their dominant passions, their inclinations, knowledge of what he made use later for exciting the revolution of which he was the mover. Thermutis, having died, her successor renewed the persecution against the Hebrews, and Moses, having fallen from the favor in which he had been held, was afraid that he would not be able to justify some homicide he had committed. Thus he decided to flee. He returned into Arabia Petrea, which borders on Egypt, chance having led him to the home of the chief of some tribe of this country. The services which he rendered and the talents which his master thought he discerned in him earned him earned him his good graces and one of his daughters in marriage. It is it is apropos to remark here that Moses was so bad a Jew, and that he then so little knew the redoubtable God whom he imagined later, that he married an idolatress, and that he did not even think to circumcise his children. It is in the deserts of this Arabia that while watching the herds of his father-in-law and his brother-in-law, he conceived the design of avenging the injustice that the king of Egypt had done to him by carrying by carrying trouble and sedition into the heart of his estates. He flattered himself, and he's very long-winded with this one. Okay. He flattered himself that he could easily succeed as much because of his talents as by the disposition in which he knew he would find those of his own nation already irritated against the government by the ill treatments which they had been made to suffer. It appears from the history which he left of this revolution, or at least which was left us by the author of the books attributed to Moses, that Jethro, his father-in-law, was in the plot, as well as his brother Aaron and his sister Mary, who had stayed in Egypt and with whom he had no doubt kept up in correspondence. Whatever the case, whatever the case may be, one sees from its execution that he had formed a vast plan of a good politician, and that he knew how to put to work against the Egypt all the science which he had learned there. I mean, his pretended magic, in which he was subtler and abler than all those who made a profession of the same tricks of skill at the court of Pharaoh. It is by means of these pretended prodigies that he gained the confidence of those in his nation whom he had made to rise up, and to whom was joined themselves joined themselves the mutinous, there it is, mutinous and discontented Egyptians, Ethiopians, and Arabs. Finally, boasting of the power of his divinity, the frequent conversations he had with it, by making it intervene in all the measures which he took with the chiefs of the revolt, he persuaded them so well that they followed him to the number of 600,000 combatant men without women and children, across the deserts of Arabia, in which he knew all the byways. After 6 days of marching in a difficult retreat, he prescribed to those who followed him to consecrate themselves the seventh of his God. He prescribed to those who followed him to consecrate the seventh to his God by a public rest, so as to make them believe that God favored him, that he approved his domination, and so that no one should have the audacity to contradict him. I'm sorry, I was just wondering. Was the day made for man and man for the day? I'm just saying, because on the seventh day I thought God rested. Anyway, let me continue. There was never a people more ignorant than the Hebrews, nor by consequence more credulous. To be convinced of this profound ignorance, one has only to remember in what condition these people was in Egypt when Moses made it revolt. It was hated by the Egyptians on account of the profession of the shepherds, persecuted by the sovereign, and employed at the vilest labor. In the midst of such a populace, it was not even difficult for Moses to make his talents count. He got them to believe that his God, which he named sometimes simply an angel, the God of their fathers, had appeared to him, that it was by his order that he took the trouble to lead them, and that he chose them, or that he chose him to govern them, and that they would be the favorite people of this God, provided that they believed what he said, what he would say to them on his behalf. The adroit use of his tricks and of the knowledge which he had of nature fortified these exhortations, and he confirmed what he had told them by what are called prodigies, which are capable of making always a great impression on the imbecilic populace. One may observe above all that he thought he had found a sure means of keeping the Hebrews submissive to his orders by persuading them that God himself was a good God, or good God, that God himself was their guide. I'm sorry, my Tourette's kicked in for real. By night under the shape of a column of fire, and by day under the form of a cloud. But one can also prove that this was that impostor's grossest piece of trickery. He had learned during his stay in Arabia that as the country was vast and uninhabited, it was the custom of those who traveled in groups to take guides who led them at night by means of a brazen whose flame they followed, and by day by the smoke of this same brazier, which all the members of the caravan could discover, and in consequence not get lost. This custom, and that's the part I was looking for before. Take that here, right there. Okay. Um, discovered. And in consequence did not get lost. This custom was still in use among the Medes and the Assyrians. Moses made use of it and made it pass for a miracle and for a mark of the protection of his God. Let no one believe me on the bare assertion when I say he is a trickster. Believe Moses himself, who in the 10th chapter of Numbers, verse number 19 up to the 33rd, praised his brother-in-law Hobad to come with the Israelites so that he might show them the way because they knew because he knew the country. This is conclusive, for if it were God who marched before Israel day and night as a cloud or a column of fire, could they have a better guide? Could there have been a better guide? I'm sorry, is that how you said it? Could they have a better guide? Okay, got you. Nevertheless, here is Moses exhorting his brother-in-law by the most pressing reasons to serve him as guide. Therefore, a cloud and a column of fire were God only for the people and not for Moses. Wait a minute. Therefore, the column and the cloud of fire. I'm sorry. Damn it, I messed it up again. Therefore, the cloud and the column of fire were God only for the people and not for Moses. Ooh, y'all hear that? Did y'all catch that? I know I was tripping. I mean, stumbling a little bit, but he's saying it was a process over there in Arabia to have a guide that had a brazen, little flame, if you would, to guide them at night and also at day. And the Syrians and the Medes still use that practice, but when it came down to God will be your God and your reward and all that stuff in the biblical text, and I like that scripture too because I found out something conceptually about it. But he's saying that flame and that flame and that, and we see it in the biblical text if you're reading it just without any of this information. But the people, that guide was for the people. I'm sorry, that illustration of cloud and column was for the people, but Moses himself was looking at somebody else to be their guide. Where was that nigga at? Okay, in the story, the story would have you think, and I'm just venting here. The story would have you think that if he asked the guy to be his guide and he might have said no or he didn't say anything, that we never revisit this guide that they're talking about from Numbers 10 verse 19 through 33. Okay, but we don't study like that. Okay, or even question that. Okay, I forgot where I had read that at, but it was in this book. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so God was only for the people and not for Moses. In other words, Moses didn't believe in the shit that he was doing. He was a magician and a politician. Okay, the poor wretches, delighted to find themselves adopted by the master of the gods upon leaving a cruel servitude, applauded Moses and swore to obey him blindly. His authority being confirmed, he wanted to render it perpetual, and under the suspicious pretext of establishing the cult of this god, whose lieutenant he said he was. He first of all made his brother and his children chiefs of the royal palace, that is to say, of the place where he found it convenient to have the oracles rendered. This place was out of the sight and pretense of the people. Next, oh, y'all gonna like this shit. I'm remembering what they said in here now. Next, he did what has always been practiced in new establishments, that is to say, prodigies, miracles by which the simple were dazzled, some were stupefied, which inspired pity in those who were penetrating and who read through these impostures. Okay, say which inspired pity in those who were penetrating and who read through these impostures. However, clever Moses was, he would have had great difficulty in making himself obeyed if he had not been able to force in hand, or had force in hand, Trickery without arms rarely succeeds. Despite the great number of dupes who submitted blindly to the wishes of the skillful legislator, there were found persons bold enough to reproach his bad faith, saying to him that under false appearances of justice and equality he had taken possession of everything, that the sovereign authority being attached to his family, no one any longer had the right to pretend to it, and finally that he was less the father than the tyrant of the people. But on this occasion, Moses was a profound politician. As a profound politician, rid himself of these bold spirits and spared none of those who cast blame on his government. It was It is with similar precautions and by always characterizing his torments as divine just vengeance that he reigned as absolute despot, and to finish in the manner in which he had begun, that is to say, as a trickster and an impostor, he precipitated himself into an abyss which he had caused to be dug in the middle of a solitude, where he retired from time to time under the pretext of going to confer secretly with God, so as to uh, conciliate thereby the respect and submission of his subjects. In short, check this out. This should be where he says it at. In short, he threw himself down this precipice prepared long in advance, so that his body would not have been found, and so that it would be believed that God had carried him off to render him like himself. He was not ignorant that the memory of the patriarchs who had preceded him were in great veneration, even thought their sepulchres had been found, but this did not suffice to satisfy his ambition. He had to be revered like a god, over whom death had no hold. This was no doubt the implication of what he said at the beginning of his reign, that he was established by God to be the God of the Pharaoh. Elijah, following his example, Romulus, Zomalix, and all those who have had the foolish vanity to eternalize their names, have hidden the time of their death so that they would be thought immortal. How far we got to go to the next one? Because a bitch hungry. Okay, there's the one on Jesus. Where's the one on Muhammad? Okay, they don't go there. Okay. Oh, shoot. 11. But to come back to legislators, there have been none who did not make their laws from some divinities, and who have not tried to persuade that they were themselves something more than simple mortals. Numa Pompilius have tasted the sweets of solitude, found it difficult to leave it, or having tasted the sweets of solitude, found it difficult to lead it, though it was to fill the throne of Romulus. But seeing himself forced into it by public acclamations, he profited from the devoutness of the Romans, and insinuated to them that he conversed with the gods, and that thus, if they absolutely desired for their king, they should resolve to obey him blindly and to observe religiously the laws and divine instructions which had been dictated to him by the nymph Agura. Alexander the Great had no less vanity. Not content to see himself the master of the world, he wanted to be believed as the son of Jupiter. Perseus also pretended to have his birth from the same god and from the virgin Danae. Plato regarded Apollo as his father, who had had him of a virgin. There were still other personages who had the same madness. Doubtless all these great men thought their dealings, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to stop you guys, I'm stumbling. There were still other personages who had the same madness. Doubtless all these great men thought these dreamings justified by the opinion of the Egyptians, who maintained that the Spirit of God could have commerce with a woman and make her fecund. Okay. How long we been up here? 3 hours. I ain't reading to you niggas no more. No, I'm fucking with y'all. Okay. We're gonna come back. We got further than before because before we got to 3 little subsections. This time we were able to get over to page 22, but I am struggling so bad. I'm losing my focus on this, and it's not because I'm not interested totally. It's just that I'm getting tired right now. So we're gonna come back and do some more of this. You know, I'm not gonna sit here and read the whole book in one day. Shit, I don't even do that with myself. But let me put this bookmark in here for where we're gonna start at, because this is a good little next section to start in. It's gonna be section number 12 of chapter 3, and this is when they start talking about how, you know, talk about Jesus in this narrative of the 3 impostors and the problem with the age of enlightenment. What we found so far is that some of the people back in the back that they've talked about so far were ignorant. Okay, followed blindly this, that, and the other. Now, for some people who are Christian, raised Christian, next part's gonna be rough because he's not gonna hold back on some of the tricky dick shit that was going on with Jesus. And for the Islamic ones, hey, Muhammad's in here too about what he did too. Okay, but you know, we say all this shit is sacred and off with your head, and you know, you can't say that about my God, and da 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 da. But that's the problem with the age of enlightenment. Y'all don't want people to be enlightened, to understand. Okay, you want them to feign. Some people feigning ignorance, and some people feigning that enlightenment. Okay, you know, and go back to the 1719 and the 1776 and the 1619. One is a journalist who actually got a Pulitzer Prize or whatever the case is for what history, when she's not a historian, critiquing people who have PhDs in history, law, and government and all this other shit, and the classics. How dare you, feigning to be intelligent? But the masses don't know any different because sometimes we don't want to study. We don't want to take the time. You know, like I heard one sister, I just stumbled across her channel. She says she's reading for the people who don't, or the people who can't. And that's one of the things that I do here sometimes. I read for the people who can't read, don't read. You know, it's people in my family who couldn't read. Okay, some of us who don't have time. Y'all helped me out a lot being in that truck driving, and I can just listen to y'all rather than some propaganda on the radio, you know, and not respond or whatever. But here, you know, that's what I do it for, to share information with people so that they can get it. Like last night when I was talking to my daughter-in-law, my stepdaughter, she was like, I said, go over here, look this up, and just hit that link for Wikipedia. Wikipedia lies, it's full of shit, it don't say nothing, it's lies. I said, look, 2 things about Wikipedia. One, they ain't lying about everything if they lie. It's a good jump off point, and it's a place that you can look for introductory information, and you don't have to spend your money to buy the book, which is one way that they block us from the knowledge. The research afterwards, that's up to you and your due diligence. Do you want to stumble across this? Because I got asked a lot of questions last night, and my answer at the end of it was, if it's important, go find out what it is. Just like the brother told me, if you want to know about your family, go over there to a particular place and find out. We got to put money where the mouth is. We got to put action to the rest of this. Or some people can just say, I don't know what I'm going to do, but God got me. God going to handle it. When you get down to what it really is, you'll know how idiotic that statement is. Okay? Okay? But that's not a way to take, for me taking away from anybody's belief. Because my anchor still holds as well. Just because they did it this way doesn't mean that we don't have hope in our hearts, and it doesn't mean that we don't have fear in our hearts. Okay? It's a human condition. All right? But examine it. Figure out why you have it. If it's something you can change, change it. Okay? If it's something you need, keep it. Okay? But don't push it on people like it's the end all be all, because at the end of the day, coming from a Christian perspective, dealing with this, it's the God spell. Okay? It's a spell, and it's used by language. Don't forget about language. Don't forget a lot of this shit is literature that people wrote. And literature that we're examining, not God. All right. So family, I'm going to shoot this intro. We're going to throw my niece up here one more time because it's trauma. It's trauma. Okay. And then we're going to go on and get out of here so I can get some other work done. I got today and tomorrow to do it because it's a holiday. Hope y'all having a good holiday weekend and being safe out there. Don't get into no trouble. Don't start nothing you can't put out. Okay. But enjoy your weekend, enjoy your holiday, and y'all know what y'all know what Tuesday is gonna be. It's gonna be back to work, back to the hustle, and back to the grind, and that's okay. Okay, let us not sit down on our laurels. So here's my niece shooting her out again.
Trauma, a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. Ain't no need to panic, I know where I'm headed. Remember I said it, just keep in mind how you treated me, cause I promise you'll never forget it. Now physical wounds may heal, but I know the trauma's embedded. I get tired of trying to sit still, acting all calm and collected, cause I know shit can get real. I know how I am, so I try to get it. I told you 1,000 times, chill. How the fuck do you not get the message? These niggas swear they so real. In real life, they really just reckless. It's hard to swallow those pills when you know that they full of deception. It's cold, high moment of stressing. Put you close to depression. Plan for the future, stuck in the past. It's hard to cope with the present when you don't know how to let go. It make it real hard to move on from the lesson. And you ain't nothing like them. So you can't just take any suggestions. If you grow up with a lot of neglect, everything feel like a threat. First you start off real nervous, but then you learn how to step. But you still don't know what to expect. It's just hard to accept that this just is what it is. Hell nah, I ain't going for that. Cause it's trauma, post-traumatic. Why make it so dramatic? It's trauma, it's post-traumatic. Why make it so erratic? It's trauma, post-traumatic trauma, post-traumatic trauma, post-traumatic. I've been going through trauma since birth. That's part of the curse. Mama don't want me, daddy don't want me. Damn, is that what I'm worth? Life just had to throw me a curve. These grandma snatched me and had me in church. And I really feel bad for my other sisters, cause honestly, they had it worse. This life's not real, they got it rehearsed. It's not skill, they copying words. In the way some of y'all be treating y'all kids, that shit really got me concerned. Never had nothing real, that's not what I learned. At least not till I got me a turn. But to this day in my relationships, I still feel like I'm not being heard. See, it's hard to outrun a memory. That shit could get menacing, going in and out and back and forth inside your head like a tennis ring. Now it's me against the world, and I feel like I don't need anything. I start getting into things, getting out, getting things, which only made me want bigger things. Now I'm walking around like I'm fixing things, till God threw me in the thick of things. Like stop, that's not how I intended things. And it's not a little thing, cause for you, L, I got bigger things. Now I know what that really means. I gotta get through this by any means, cause it's trauma, post-traumatic. Why make it so dramatic? It's trauma, it's post-traumatic. Why make it so erratic? It's trauma, post-traumatic trauma, post-traumatic trauma, post-traumatic, it's trauma, post-traumatic. Why make it so dramatic? It's trauma, it's post-traumatic. Why make it so erratic? It's trauma, post-traumatic trauma, post-traumatic trauma, post-traumatic trauma.
Hello? Man, I just got off the line for crazy house. Man, what's the reason? You know what I'm saying?
The Choctaw Advocate, Butler, Alabama. Oh, shit.
If I get bored, I might come back. Peace, y'all. Take care.